All right, shall we go, Abigail? Great, welcome, everybody. Let's turn off our cell phones, please. At this point, we do a land acknowledgement. I was at One Community Health this week, and they have on the back of their T-shirts the language that says we acknowledge there were folks here before us. I thought that was kind of a nice touch. So as we conduct our business tonight, let's just kind of keep that in mind. Let's salute the flag, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do we have any agenda additions or corrections, Abigail?
Mayor, we do not.
Great. Carolyn Smale has signed up to speak to us. Come forward, please. There's a red circle, touch it and it will turn green. Yeah, on the edge.
White dots.
We're going to get, there we go.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you could keep it to about 3 minutes, that'd be great, Carolyn. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Oh, hearings are 5. Okay. My name's Carolyn Smale. I live at 808 Cascade Avenue here in Hood River. And I just wanted to talk a little about e-bikes. I noticed it in the beginning of the summer last year. Younger people on e-bikes. It's hard for me to tell ages to see if some of them I don't think are old enough to even be on them. And they're not obeying the traffic rules. They seem very dangerous. So the specific examples would be coming up past the post office. There were 2 e-bikes, and then the car came up, and then one goes this way and one goes that way. Well, it's not funny because they're going, 15 to 20 miles an hour, and
Yeah.
You have a bike helmet on and not a motorcycle helmet on. And then the other day, slowing down at the post office, the kid on the e-bike goes around on the left, which isn't really safe either, because you don't know if somebody's on the street turning that way, that you're like a car. And then another one was going over the bridge to turn onto 84 to go on 84 West. Car had the green arrow, went to turn, e-bike flying up, honked. This is what we got. Sorry. So I like e-bikes. I like that kids have a way of a little more affordable transportation than a car. But I think maybe there needs to be some regulations, some licensing, some permitting. And it seems a lot of the kids don't know the rules of the road at all. They don't know that you have to act like a car and be a car on the road. And they don't, half of them will slow at a stop sign, the other half just zip right through them. And you're going pretty fast. You're not going super slow. So I don't know if the city wants to address that. Oh, the worst one was kid was riding on the sidewalk in front of River City. Didn't slow down, didn't stop, goes right through that intersection. The only reason he didn't get hit by a car was because the lady kind of slowed down because it was the intersection and I was walking on the corner. Otherwise, he would have got plowed into it. And the problem is it's going to be the adult's fault. So I think
There's more and more of them.
there's more and more of them, and they're great, but I think our kids need to learn the rules of the road.
Thank
And
you.
some adults.
Luckily, the chief watches this, so we will pass this on. Thank you, Carolyn.
All right, thank you. Welcome back.
Thank you. So it looks to me like some folks are signing up. That's great. Let's have some more folks speak to us.
Wants to go first? You can do 2 minutes. Okay.
Ami, if you could read the first name.
He would like to go first, and it's Ubaldo Hernandez.
Thank you, Ubaldo. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Well, I'm glad to have this space to speak up on behalf of our Latino community, Mexican community, immigrant community, that there are a lot of big issues with access to housing, affordable housing. Unfortunately, prices in this community are increasing, and our working community is being forced to be moved out of the city, out of our communities in the county, basically. One of the things that we want to talk to you guys here is about an issue we have with the trailer park with the Safeway is across the street, where there is a lot of confusion with people because there is some rumors the person sold the place, but they don't know how the terms of this. They're getting some notifications that now they have to pay the rent to a specific office. And this thing is creating a lot of stress with the community because they don't know what's going to happen with this site. And as a part of the organization Comunidades, we want also to hear from the city council, how the city council can help our residents to stay here, to stay in this area, because we don't believe it's fair that all these people that work in this community for decades, now they have to move out because of the greed of few people that bring in more money and increasing the cost of living. One of the things is like all this is workforce, and all of these people have been working here for decades on the packing houses, orchards, picking our fruit, packing our fruit. And this community is creating not just an injustice, social injustice issue, but also environmental issue. We want to turn this city into electrification, into the electrification system that way we want to protect the environment, but displacing so many families and sending them 20, 40 miles away. That people has to drive every day about 80, 120 miles on a car because they can afford to drive an electric car. And that's putting gas, create more green gases that will affect our environment. So this is one of the things that if we want to say that this is a green city, it has to be applied with social justice, because not having social justice is created another environmental problem, because all these people is going to come back to work every day and they're going to leave their families. They're going to use more resources to move in and out. So please listen to our members of our community. This case is a specific case about trailer park, but we have, and we've been hearing from other members of the community, they want to talk about this, about rent control, be able to stay here, and the communities that they've been living for decades, and the communities they work at, and they've been collaborating and building for many, many years. Thank you.
Thank you, Ubaldo. Maria Espinosa.
Buenas tardes a todos. Gracias por escucharnos.
Perdóname un momento. Abigail, do we have mechanism for interpreting tonight?
We did not arrange for an interpreter. We didn't get advance notice. We
Okay.
can do that.
We talked to a person that works in the city, and we're supposed to have a translator today,
Oh,
but I can translate.
I was told that the plan was that we would need an interpreter at the next meeting, but not at this meeting. Did I misunderstand that?
We agreed to come to the next meeting, the city council meeting.
I'm so sorry.
It might be a misunderstanding, but we can help with the translation.
I
If
appreciate
you would
it.
be able to interpret, that would be great. Ubaldo.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, but the other thing is, we don't mind, and we don't mind to advise, but also as a right, the city needs to have somebody to translate, even if it's only one person coming to talk.
Let this be
And,
a great reminder and process improvement for us
And,
all that we
and
shouldn't
we
have
don't
to
mind, but
task others.
I think this is a learning process, right? As a community, we're working together, we're growing together, but this is one of the things that also needs to be done. But yeah, I'll do that.
Okay, tengo algo para, mi nombre es María Espinosa. Tengo algo para leerles.
I
de
have
lo que
something to read to
pensamos.
you of what we think.
Okay, hola a todos, soy María. Hace 10 años que vivo en Las Trailas, mis hijos pequeños llegaron aquí a Cool River, van a la escuela. Se
I've been
criaron-
living for 10 years in the trailer park. My little ones arrive here really young age and they go to school here.
Desde que llegamos a Cool River, a mí me gustó la naturaleza, los ríos, y para mí es un lugar muy bonito.
Since we arrived to Hood River, we fell in love with nature. We love the rivers and this is a really beautiful, healthy place.
Las únicas malas experiencias es el precio de la renta, el abuso que sufrimos del dueño de las trailas, Mike.
Her only bad experience is a high cost of rent and the abuse they suffer from their landlord.
La mayoría somos inmigrantes y al parecer somos muchos, pero tal vez sentimos que no le importamos a todos.
The majority of we are immigrants. We are a lot, but we felt like we don't, there's not interest from others to us.
Y déjenme explicarles que los abusos en el aumento de la renta del dueño
And let me explain you the abuse of the increase on the cost of rent from the landlord.
Ok, el espacio de las trailas de mayo aumentó de 600 a 800 sin suficiente aviso.
The space,
El aumento.
yeah, she's talking about the space of the trailers it's not a match, but they suffer an increase on the rent without a notice from $600 to $800.
Y la ley dice que el rentero debe dar 90 días de notificación.
They say
Yeah.
that the law says the landowner, they have to give an advice of 90 days in advance for increase the rent which they didn't have it.
Ok, notificación. Se aumenta más del 5%, pero a él no le importó. También aumentó en el 2021, debía ser 9.2%.
So the increase was more of the 5%, but he didn't care. Also, he increased the rent in 221, which it should be 9.2%. And the increase was for the 31.66%, the increase on the rent.
Y también hemos pedido que arreglen las calles o mantengan limpias en el tiempo de invierno porque es un área donde se junta mucho la nieve y tampoco hay modo de que nos puedan ayudar. De hecho, se han caído personas por el mismo aumento de nieve.
They also been asking for the landlord to keep the road and the parking lot clean on the winter time, which it never does, and a lot of people, few people already had accidents.
Y antemano les quiero agradecer por escucharnos, porque tal vez ahorita somos pocos los que venimos, pero individualmente en las trailas somos 5, 7, tal vez más de familia.
Before Hannah, I really appreciate that you are listening to us, because you see right now we are a few, but there is way more people that want to come. They live on the trailers.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you, gracias.
Thank you for coming, Maria. Perla Torres?
Hi, my name is Perla Torres. I live at 1823 Cascade Avenue. I have to work 2 jobs to help my mom pay the bills. Plus I study and I might get a 3rd job because of how expensive it is. And that's a struggle for me because I'm 19 and even my brother's helping out too. So it's tough for us. And yeah, I don't really know how much to say, but it's a struggle for me and my family, not only me, but for everyone else too. So I hope you guys can help us out in whatever you guys can. And that's about it.
Thanks for coming, Perla.
You're welcome.
Eldario Romero?
Okay. Okay, Yo vivo en las trailers por como 15 años. Justo en la trailer 23 Cascade Avenue.
He vivido en las trailers por alrededor. Sorry.
Yeah.
Can I, somebody help? I've been living in the trailer park for 23 years.
El parqueadero nunca se le ha hecho nada. Cuando cae la nieve, no limpian el parqueadero. A una persona se cayó en el parqueadero y no podía entrar la ambulancia.
You say that they never clean the park, the street on the park. There is a lot of snow, and especially in the winter time. And unfortunately, a person fell on the parking lot, and it was so much snow the ambulance couldn't drive in.
Cuando cierran la agua para arreglar el parqueadero, regarla una pipa que se quebra, nunca le dan honores o un aviso a las personas.
So when they do maintenance, sometimes with the pipes, they close the water from the trailer park to fix something. They never advise people, give a notice people in advance to they're gonna do some sort of maintenance.
Se le avisa al manager y el manager nunca hace nada.
They constantly let the managers know about the situations they encounter, and the managers does nothing.
Nos dijo el dueño que iba a aumentar la renta antes del COVID, que iba a aumentar $175 porque iba a arreglar el parqueadero.
So he said that before COVID, the landlord increased $175 to the rent for the parking space, because with the reason that he was going to fix the streets, the parking space, to give maintenance and.
Y tratamos de hablar con él todos, y él dijo que no quería hablar con nosotros, que si no nos gustaba, que en Golden Dale estaba estaba más barato el lugar ahí, las trailers, o los espacios.
So after that, they asked him if he could talk to the renters, and he said no, he didn't want to talk to them, and also told them that if they were not happy, they couldn't go and rent in Goldendale. Trailer spots are cheaper there.
Y ya pasó después como un año y nos volvió a aumentar otra vez la renta. Le pagamos cuando comenzamos ahí eran 525.
So and then a year later, he increased the rent again. But when we started living there at the beginning, we used to pay $525.
Después que nos subió la renta ya era 700.
Then he increased the rent to $700.
Después ya para otro aumento nos aumentó $100.
And then give another raise for $100. So that's
Ahorita estamos
$100.
pagando 800.
So they say that now they're paying $800 for the parking space. We have to, this is not that he's renting the trailers, just for the space.
I'm the owner of the trailer. And I pay for the trailer. My trailer is my trailer. I only have to pay the money. If I don't like it, I have to leave. They say, okay.
So, and also they, I do want to try this.
Oh, cuando puso la tienda de marihuana ahí al lado, en su lugar, pues, él nunca nos pidió consentimiento. Ya había como 40 niños.
So he said that they've been having trouble because they put a pot store outside the entrance or exit of the trailer park, and they never were consulted. They were just, there is about 40 kids on the trailer park, and they have to live with people coming and buying drugs. The high school and the middle school bus stops there in front of the pot store. And that's really comfortable for them to see their kids seeing people buying drugs and kids are just passing through all the time. And this is one of the things that what they said when I talked to members of the trailer park, they say they receive a letter that they have to sign. They thought that was a contract, but seems like at the end was a permit, like they were agreeing to have the pot store outside the trailer park. So this is something confusing also because they don't know if they signed something that they were accepting the pot store outside of the trailer park. But the thing is, they have a lot of kids coming in and out and the pot store is right in their way.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on with our agenda, we have a presentation about safe routes to school.
Give me a second here to cue things up. All right. Well, it was a very hard few minutes there from the community, so excuse me if I was a little bit put off. Okay. Good evening, Mayor Blackburn, City Council members. I'm Jonathan Sklovengill. I'm the city's GIS analyst, and in this case, the Safe Routes to School coordinator. Tonight, I am pleased to share with you a quick presentation on the upcoming Safe Routes to School Hood River Middle School demonstration. This project, this will be the city's first on-street demonstration project highlighting active transportation options specifically for students here in Hood River. The city has partnered with Hood River County School District to organize a 3-month-long project along the 17th and 18th Street corridor, beginning at Belmont and ending at Sherman Avenues. Pending any supply chain setbacks, the project is targeting a July 31st installation start date and is projected to last until the 1st of November. This demonstration is over 4 years in the making. City engineering and TSB recognizes the gap in pedestrian infrastructure along 18th Street from Belmont to Taylor Avenue. In 2018, the city applied for an ODOT competitive construction grant to overhaul the streetscape, but was not awarded the funding. The city fell short again in 2020, and the cost of the current design has become too high for consideration. In 2019, Megan Ramey, now with the Hood River School District, as their full-time Safe Routes to School coordinator, worked to bring the Portland State University's Better Blocks program here to Hood River. As you well know, COVID-19 put the brakes on many projects, and Better Blocks was also one of them. While Better Blocks program, along with most of the world, was on pause, the city made outstanding progress on Safe Routes to School ecosystem, culminating in the March 22 council approval of the Hood River Safe Routes to School plan report. This report once again brought 17th and 18th Streets corridor to the front. The PSU Better Blocks program successfully restarted in the spring of 22. This program brought a team of capstone level engineering students, their mentors and instructors to Hood River to propose how we could better use the right of way around Hood River Middle School. With their preliminary report in hand, city staff worked with school district to refine the streetscape plan and bring the project where it is today. Before I go any further, I need to give serious thanks to everyone for the enormous efforts to get to this project where it is now, and a future thanks for what's to come. Staff from nearly every city department has been significantly involved in the review and administration of the project. That's Public Works, Engineering, Planning, Police, Fire and EMT, finance, and the communications folks. I also want to thank the professionals at DKS Engineering for their prompt safety review of the proposal. It should also go without saying, but thank you to ODOT for their many safe routes funding opportunities, and Ms. Ramey at the school district for applying for and managing these grants. As this demonstration will be the first for Hood River, I want to thank the ODOT Work Zone engineers, PBOT, and the planning staff at Alta Planning and Design for their hours of meetings and emails to identify materials that would both persist for 3 months and clean up easily without damaging our streets. So once again, to everyone who's been involved, thank you, but we're not done yet. All right, so now onto the project itself. This corridor is a major link between Hood River Middle School and the surrounding neighborhoods. It is also used by classes at Westside Elementary to walk from their school to community swimming pool and back again. As everyone is aware, there are no sidewalks on 18th Street between Belmont and Taylor, with a very small exception of the northwest corner of Belmont. Children and adults alike must walk on the side of the street and often around parked cars to expose themselves directly to vehicle traffic. Additionally, there are no bicycle lanes or markers. Students have been seen riding all over the road, even zigzagging across from side to side, regardless of vehicle traffic. Further, most students refuse to turn right on May Street, where there is a bicycle lane, instead choosing to go down Meyer Parkway. This introduces a possibility for an unwanted encounter with emergency vehicles leaving the Hood River Fire and EMS facility. So to address those specific concerns, in place of parking, the demonstration will temporarily install an on-street protected two-way shared use path from Belmont to Taylor Avenues on the east side of 18th Street. Once the sidewalk begins at Taylor, this shared use path becomes a two-way bicycle path all the way to Sherman Avenue. Each intersection will also see new temporary crosswalks or cross bikes to increase awareness and community safety along the way. This short section of May Street that connects 18th and 17th Streets is also going to host new temporary treatments. Key concerns here are centered around both the uncontrolled eastbound traffic flow and enticing students away from Meyer Parkway as a means to getting to school. To compound on the already confusing free left turn onto 17th Street, the existing crosswalk is significantly obstructed by a utility pole, which hides students from oncoming drivers' vision. While preliminary counts showed very few students ride bicycles along May Street, those who do ride against along traffic south side of the street, regardless of whether they continue on May Street or turn up to 18th Street. Many of them ride on the sidewalk, forgoing the bikeways entirely. So to address these issues, the demonstration will temporarily install a new eastbound stop sign. This will turn the May and 17th intersection into an all-way three-way stop. The on-street two-way bicycle path will continue between 17th and 18th Streets on the south side of May. In conjunction with this new sign, bicycles will be ushered onto a two-stage left turn queue box adjoining cross bike that will connect May Street to the 17th Street arm. So at this point, you may wonder why a demonstration and not just install these treatments right now. Simply put, these prescribed treatments are new to the Hood River community. And a fixed duration demonstration will provide hands-on experience and feedback at low cost with a relatively fast turnaround. What can the city expect from this demonstration? Over the course of 3 months, community members traveling along the segment of road will experience the last month of summer break with no students present, and the first 2 months of school while the weather is still conducive to active transportation. It's the hope that this length of time will allow both students and non-students alike to better adjust to the changes than if it were just a week or weekend, much like Streets Alive. Throughout the project timeline, the city will be gathering feedback from online surveys and in-person traffic studies to help identify success and conflicts throughout the zone. The city will be in a data-driven position to adjust or alter the designs before any potential permanent installations are done. Ultimately, as with the general goal of Safe Routes to School, this demonstration aims to decrease the number of vehicle drop-offs and increase the number of children who can safely walk or ride to school. So what are the next steps? Continuing our coordination with the school district, the Safe Routes to School coordinator plans to provide continuing outreach and education for students, their families, and faculty on the hows and whys of the demonstration. Ms. Ramey is also in the process of completing the neighborhood outreach campaign to collect a 100% acceptance rate with signatures from the affected residences and businesses. Also, in the coming weeks, the city will be launching an online pre-installation survey. So keep an eye out on social media and on the city webpage for that. The survey is open to everyone, and I encourage anyone interested to take part. And finally, the installation is expected to begin very early in the morning on July 31st, and is projected to take 40 hours of dedicated labor time over the span of 1 or more weeks to fully install. So a special thanks needs to go out to Public Works Streets Crew because they'll be tackling this project on top of their regular daily business and maintenance. So that was a really quick presentation. I appreciate your time. I know there's going to be questions. Please let me know if we want to go back and revisit any signs.
Thank you, Jonathan. Any questions for Jonathan? Mark?
Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, Megan. First question is and maybe it's just a scheduling thing, is that once we get into it and we see how it's going and stuff, can we talk about it in September, October to see if we want to try to extend it, or, you know, hopefully we have lessons learned by the time school gets underway, and we'll know, because I hate to pull it all out and then talk about what do we do? So that's the first thing.
Mid-course correction.
Yeah, I mean, it might be just obvious to us. That's sort of my expectation, but if we don't talk about it, we'll say, well, that was obvious, wasn't it? How do the intersections, I know that, you know, there's construction at the end of Eugene, so this bike path goes past a few intersections, A Street, B Street, Taylor, and 17th. Is that part of, I don't see it on the slides, but I assume you have a plan for how that happens.
Yes, yeah, we're going to have a continued crosswalk / cross bike at every intersection.
Okay.
And we're going to have 3-foot tall flex posts with reflectors offset about 5 feet from every driveway and intersection. Just to guarantee that no vehicles accidentally go on the path and that it's a continued path from Belmont to Sherman.
Got it.
Yeah.
And then my last question is, when there's soccer at the middle school, it's, you know, it can be parked out on that whole, so it's just verboten, is that the?
That is part of the temporary nature of the demonstrations, to see how actual events play out. You know, part of the communication campaign with the school district and the parents is going to be alerting them that parking on the east side is taken away in exchange for this bike path.
Yeah, I think it's a communication question as well. And not only when school starts, but how are we informing the people that are used to parking there during preschool restarting? So I assume that you guys have a plan, but I'll see it multiple times a day. So
Pressure is on.
no, I'm just curious.
We can get you an inspector t-shirt.
No, we don't have that.
Is that it, Mark?
Yeah.
Other questions? Doug?
Thank you so much. I'm really excited about this program. Just kind of curious about, I guess really one thing. So you mentioned some of the data points you're going to collect for what it looks like for arriving to school and so on and so forth. Did you have a chance to collect any data about what it was like prior to the installation?
Thank you, Counselor. Yes, Megan Ramey and I have gone out a couple of days, multiple days, to take counts of what it looked like in the last couple of weeks of school. We witnessed both morning and afternoon, so arrival and dismissal on 4 different days, and have a reasonable account for, you know, how many children are walking, riding bicycles. We did take extra concern and to note e-bikes, because everyone at middle school is underage. That's a whole nother can of worms. But yeah, we definitely took that, and again, we'll be planning to do traffic count surveys before we install everything to see what a status quo in the summertime without the students looks like. And then as it's going about every 2 weeks throughout the project, just to see if we can see a statistical change in behaviors, or if nothing changes, or see what the data shows.
Right on. Yeah, and I, as I've stood out there to collect this on May Street myself in the past, it definitely seems, you mentioned, weather. So it seems like the sample time will have some time for inclement weather, because I definitely see the numbers change when it's raining, right? So it's quite a big difference. It's something I think we should think about this in terms of communications and how to ride in, inclement weather, et cetera, because it does severely decrease once it's raining. But yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Megan.
Thank you. The new stop sign going east on May Street, somewhat anecdotal in my own experience, but I think for everyone, a new traffic control that hasn't been there, if you drive it every day, your brain takes a long time to notice it's there. Are there going to be warning signs or flashing lights or something to really make it obvious that there's a stop sign and you need to stop and you had enough time to be warned? Because I think it's the extra risk is that then people expect everyone to stop and then someone blows through it, and that's obviously not a good situation. So what is that going to look like?
Sure. So I'll work from that spot and on the way out. At the three-way intersection, each stop sign, old and new, is scheduled to have orange flagging on top. It's the standard alert for a new traffic pattern installation. We're also planning to have in the preceding blocks signs saying change in traffic pattern ahead. So these will be in place, those warnings will be in place before the stop sign is placed on there. Because we don't want to have the stop sign and then a warning sign put in afterwards. So we are taking precautions to alert the community and the drivers on site to the change in traffic pattern.
Thank you. I will with that, don't put the warning signs there too far before, because then everyone will just go, oh, there's nothing here. And also blow through it.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you for all this tremendous work. My question is really around, I recall last year when you all came to present the 2022 report that there were definitely some areas around more in-person support for folks that are Spanish speaking or anyone else. So since then, what sort of support or additional support will take place to ensure that when this survey is launched, that there is in-person support, because we recognize that not everyone has access to Wi-Fi to be able to complete the survey, and that they may or may not be able to read. I don't know if it's going to be available in Spanish. And two, what sort of marketing is going to take place for this? Like, is this going to be advertised just on social media? Are you guys going to get on the radio, or Megan get on the radio to talk about this KIHR, that just to let folks know there is a survey coming out? This is an opportunity to give input.
Sure. Thank you, Counselor. Your previous concerns have not gone unheard. I'm going to walk back from the most recent comment back to the original statement. I am meeting with our communication staff on Thursday to plan our campaign. My goals is to use radio, print, and social media. We're also going to partner with Ms. Ramey and the school districts for at-home flyers and for the school districts Facebook Live broadcasts. So we're trying to do as much as we can that emulates what was successful in the Safe Routes to School Plan report. As for the survey itself, I am in the process of, identifying a translator to get it done. The platform I'm using allows for, I don't want to say unlimited, but nearly an unlimited variation of languages available if you have the capabilities to type it out right next to each other. So that is definitely something on my list to do, and it is not going to be forgotten. And as far as a offline version, I have not yet prepared an offline version. But that is definitely something that I will obviously have to work on.
You know, I want this survey to be successful. I recall the last one. I know that the numbers were a little bit lower. So if I can record a PSA for you to market that, I'm happy to do that. But just as a city overall, I'm going to continue asking these questions every time that we talk about any sort of presentation to get awareness, right? We have to have some sort of in-person support. And if it's not ourselves, who is that partner agency that can support us to make sure that we do give folks an opportunity to give their input and that they don't just have to come here to do so.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Grant.
Just a very basic question. How are the kids that are going to be riding their bikes going to be aware of the rules of the road and the new rules of the road and whatnot?
Absolutely. I keep on pointing over to my partner over here at the school district, and I will again. So as part of the grant that's funding Ms. Ramey's position at the school district, it is education, educating the school students, not just at the middle school, but everywhere in the school district on the rules of the road, on skills for bicycling, skills for walking, how to walk properly across the street isn't an innate procedure. We recognize that. So that's been a part of bike rodeos and walk rodeos and walking school buses for the last school year, practically, right? 1.5 years, thank you. So along, in partnership with her 80s, I'm sorry, what was the proper name of it?
The 80s Walk and Roll Club.
80s Walking. Yeah, the 80s Walk and Roll Club is going to be working on, getting students educated on how to use these cross bikes. What's the 2-stage cue box? I had to look up what that name actually was, because to me it was just that green box with an arrow on it. How does that work? What's expected of them? Communication out with the parents and the faculty is going to help reinforce that and help spread the word. Seeing the children use it properly is meant to encourage the adults to use it properly as well. Kind of on the shame on you, the kids are doing it, why aren't you doing it?
That was my follow-up question to answer with the other ones. Thanks.
Other questions? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
We now have a public hearing and I have a script. Let's see. I have 2 scripts. The first one is annexation. Here we go. I call to order a public hearing on the annexation by Andrew McElderry, file number 2023-06. The affected parcel currently is zoned urban, low-density residential, urban growth area UR1, and will be designated urban low-density residential R1 following annexation. A quorum of the council is present. And I will now ask all councilors to disclose any ex parte contacts, conflicts of interest, and bias in this manner. Doug.
I have none.
Tim. Megan.
I am employed by Farmers Irrigation District, and so I did review the annexation application when it was sent to my work. Did not get any information that isn't in the packet, and there's no financial bias.
Thank you. Mark.
None.
Gladys.
None.
Grant.
None.
I also have had no ex parte contacts, nor conflict of interest, nor bias. Would anyone in the audience like to question any counselor on any disclosure, ex parte contact, bias, or conflict of interest, or otherwise challenge the participation of any member of council? For audience members watching the video conference on Zoom, please use the raise hand feature in the webinar control if you wish to speak. For audience members listening by phone, please use the following commands via your phone's dial pad: *9 to raise your hand, *6 to toggle mute and unmute. In tonight's hearing, we will use the following order of presentation. First, begin with staff. Second, the applicants may present testimony. Third, anyone else in favor of the proposal may testify. Fourth, opponents to the proposal. If there is opponent testimony, the applicants will have an opportunity to present final rebuttal. The applicants have the last word because an applicant has the burden of proving compliance with the mandatory approval criteria. After that, we will check to see if staff has any parting comments following the conclusion of all public testimony. Number 7, finally, after everyone interested in these matters have had a chance to testify, we will close the record, deliberate, and render a decision tonight. Here are some basic rules for presenting testimony in tonight's hearing. Only present testimony in the order I just recited, and do so only at the podium in front of the table unless you are watching or listening by Zoom. Begin with your name and mailing address. Please limit your testimony to the substantive issues and the principal approval standards in ORS 222 and HRMC 17.15. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence with sufficient specificity to allow us or the parties to respond to the issue will preclude an appeal to the City Council or LUBA based on that issue. Finally, failure by the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow us to respond to the issue will preclude an action for damages in circuit court. May we have the staff report, please?
Thank you, Chair, or Mr. Mayor, Chair, holding this hearing. You have a staff report in your packet and request by the applicant. The item before you is to consider an annexation request from McElderry. This matter was heard by Planning Commission on June 5th, is being forwarded to you. Other than by election, council is the only body authorized to annex property. And we're asking you to consider this request and determine one or both of the parcels to be developed, or excuse me, to be annexed, should be brought into the city, and the extent of the frontage improvements required. We're asking you to open the public hearing, the conclusion of the hearing, deliberate. We're here for questions. You have a recommendation for approval to bring in with the recommendations from staff to bring in both parcels and accept the engineering recommendation to extend 150 feet of sidewalk south on 30th. This is all prepared and written down in long form from page 25 to 59 in your packet. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
Second, the applicant may present testimony. Andrew.
Good evening, Andrew McElderry. I reside at 657 Rocky Road. My family has lived there for almost 30 years, predating 29th and 30th Street development south of May Street. As indicated in your packets, I'm here to request annexation to the city of Hood River. Last fall, I was looking into building a small outbuilding on my property, which would include a bathroom. The goal was to shield us from the development on the former Tanner Ranch property in hopes of retaining our privacy. Through the building application process, the county sanitation department stated that our septic had exceeded its half-life and could possibly fail sooner rather than later. While we have ample property to replace our septic and drain field several times over, we were told that we cannot due to our immediate proximity to the city proper. Should our septic fail, we would be required to hook up to the city sewer located on 30th Street. Planning then told me that first I must request annexation to meet the requirement to hook up to the city sewer. So here I am asking permission to meet the city's requirements. This process allows the city to put certain conditions on the request while handcuffing me with the requirement to hook up and not repair or replace my septic system. In short, the city wants me to put in a sidewalk, curbs, gutters, street trees, etc., that in my opinion negatively impact my property value. Also, why I'm required to pay for all these improvements. I cannot access 30th Street from my property. I must also grant the city an easement on my property consisting of approximately 2,480 square feet, for which I will not receive any financial compensation. The sidewalk alone would cost me $150,000. I researched that with developers in town and for contractors in town. Cost me another $100,000 to $125,000 to put in the rest of the required conditions. Over $250,000 to hook up to city sewer. That doesn't include the cost of running the lateral sewer line from 30th Street, main line to my property, the system development charges, remuneration for repairing 30th Street, etc. In reading through all the conditions and requirements, it strikes me that they exist to put the onus on developers. Developers can spread the cost across their whole project as opposed to lumping them on one household. I'm not a developer. I have no intention of subdividing my property, building any new homes in my property. We have specifically designed our property in such a fashion that without demolishing the house, the main lot cannot be divided to accommodate development. My only goal is that my house remains habitable. I cannot help but mention a few other points of confusion. In doing my research, I noticed there are many streets, some old, but some very new, that do not have any sidewalks. 29th Street, for instance, just south of May, doesn't have any sidewalks. In one of the many discussions I've had with folks, I learned that my neighbor to the north hooked up the city sewer on 30th Street, but never had to pay for building sidewalks, curbs, gutters, etc. Honestly, this confuses the heck out of me and has brought a great deal of stress for the last 5 months. I hope that the time is taken to review the requirements for annexation, and we're looking at a single property owner. The burden is not placed on the whole, the burden is placed on the whole community. Let's face it, I will not be using the sidewalk, but I'm sure the housing to the north as far as Fox Hill will. Honestly, I hope that the council members can put themselves in my shoes. Ask yourselves what your opinion would be in this situation. So the question remains, is there a solution to this dilemma? I am hoping that the council will consider the following. Allowing me to hook up to the city sewer with the provision that any development, subdivision, or building of new family dwelling would require the property owner to meet the conditions outlined by the staff. Furthermore, should the conditions be met, the city would allow access to 30th Street from the property being annexed. If the city chooses not to assist in finding a more equitable solution and require to meet all the conditions forthwith, then I would just thank you for your time and humbly withdraw my request for annexation. I'll find another way. In short, if you require me to do all these conditions, meet them to hook up the city sewer immediately, I withdraw my request. If we can come up with a contractual agreement where we can move this down the road at such time that I choose to develop the property, which I never will, then we can meet those conditions you put forward for the annexation. I just hope you guys can look at this and see the inequity of it. $250,000 to hook up the city sewer because I'm required by the city to hook up the city sewer should my septic fail, for which I have to ask for permission to annex the city to get this all done. I'm here for questions.
Thank you, Andrew. Questions for Andrew?
I have a question for staff.
Great, stand by. Thank you, Andrew. Anyone else in favor of the proposal may testify. I'm checking the Zoom. I don't see anybody on Zoom. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of this proposal? Do we have any opponents to the proposal? No opponents, so no rebuttal. Staff, any parting comments?
The mayor, we're here for any questions that you may have.
Great. Mark, question for staff?
Was it the city or county that states that the property owner can't keep using the septic for the new bathroom?
That would be the call of the county's health official.
Right.
Sanitarian, or
Right.
no longer sanitarian, but
Right.
county health. They are the DEQ representatives that control on-site septic, its issuance, repair.
Right. And then on page 18 of our packet, and it looks like I can't read what page it is, the one with the map, it only shows the new annexation lines do not include the second parcel, but you mentioned both parcels. Is that just a?
The map was initially submitted with one parcel. It was the request and recommendation of staff to include both 3,400, or excuse me, 3003, 3004. So the map would be modified to reflect that upon your direction.
And then one last question. Did we look at pulling in other properties at the same time? I know that
We did not ask the applicant to bring in additional properties outside of what they owned.
Okay, thank you.
Grant.
Just I want to check my understanding to make sure it's entirely accurate. Any property adjacent to the city limits, whenever they pull a building permit and they'll hook up to city sewer, it's a requirement citywide and in the urban growth boundary that they are annexed into the city and have to hook up to city sewer. Is that correct?
There's some, let me clarify, the request or the requirement to annex is really not related to building permit. It's related to the connection of the city's infrastructure and water and sewer system. So there are some permits in some circumstances that we've documented that wouldn't trigger that. New dwelling, if you're within 300 feet, it's not only if you're adjacent, but if you're within 300 feet, essentially the sanitarian, but for a circumstance where they'd find it infeasible to connect, should be connecting and should be annexing before. So that would be a circumstance. Larger modifications and repairs, certain repairs to your facility, home expansions that don't trigger could be issued and it wouldn't trigger annexation. So new dwellings typically will, especially within 300 feet. That's an administrative rule and a Department of Environmental Quality rule that makes its way down to us. So depends.
And generally, if we're adding additional sewer services or health services, that sort of thing.
Sewer service is the trigger. Right. So if the building permit requires new sewer
Sewer services.
new sewer requires the annexation.
That is citywide policy and has been such for quite some time, as I understand it, correct?
2016.
Yeah, thanks.
Tim.
So if the annexation were to occur without the building, would there be the requirement for the sidewalk construction?
What we have is a circumstance where we're looking at the annexation policy and when does it become, you know, what are the terms and conditions? The idea that the street is not compliant is part of the issue. It was not required to be upgraded at time of land division. It was not required to be upgraded at time of house construction, nor subsequent permits by the county. When we look at annexations, we're going to look always at the circumstances of the improvements, whether they're deficient, whether they're concurrent, and make recommendations proportionate on that. In this instance, engineering has requested not all public improvements to bring them up to standard, just the sidewalk, as a way to have a proportionate amount of improvement based on the development. So the sidewalk terminates at the property. The property is only being asked to handle its frontage, not additional frontage, and defer the improvements for the southern piece until some other time. So we think that's a rational and proportionate exaction to connect to the sewer to be brought in the city, to bring in essentially the parcel not completely up to standard, but a little more up to standard for pedestrian facilities.
So how much would it cost to hook up to the city sewer? Those things were.
City sewer cost, not including the construction part, we're looking at about 5,000
So
for the tab,
because he's adjacent to these things that are not doing well, it's going to cost like 30 times more. Is that what we're asking? It's $150,000. Is that what you said, Andrew?
Yeah, I think that was
$150,000 for the sidewalk.
I'm not aware of $150,000 sidewalk. So we're talking $10 a square foot, high estimate, 6 feet wide, 150 feet long. We don't get to 100, but also we're not bidding it and we're not programming it. So,
All right, Tim, if you'd like to speak to Andrew, please feel free.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I'm just trying to clarify, because that seems to be the crux of conflict. If you want to step up, Andrew, that's great. So I talked to a concrete contractor to get my base costs. Just for his costs alone was over $50,000. Then I've got to do the earthwork and then the engineering and everything else that goes along with it, permitting process, the whole bit. It's not 100 feet. It's I have almost 250 lineal feet abutting the city if we're going to take in both lots. And I'm only requesting one lot, but the city wants both lots. So therefore, I'm assuming that the onus is on me to do city sidewalk for the whole length. So I based my numbers on talking to some folks that I know in the construction business, and that's what I came up with. Yeah, and I'm not a contractor. So I actually asked the city to provide me some estimates. Not at one point did the city even give me a cost of $10 per lineal foot for a sidewalk. So they would not provide me with any ideas and numbers, so I had to go do the homework and research. Thank you. Justin. So, I mean, there definitely seems to be a disconnect here somehow.
Yeah, the conditions don't indicate anything more than 150 feet. That's the northern tax law. That's written in your packet. So the recommendation to be more than that is not, there's no curb and gutter recommended in the packet. There's the sidewalk exclusively and the necessary grading to do it. That's the recommendation for everyone.
And so, I'm sorry, Andrew, you said 250 feet, is that? Yes. 250.
Megan.
And I heard Andrew say that was for both lots, but the city engineering is only requiring it for the 3003.
Yeah, northern lot that's built.
Okay, so not for both lots.
Correct. Not the southern.
Tim, more?
So if it's 250, even if it's 150. Right? And the cost is $150,000. That still seems like it's I'm not doing the math in my head. But say it's like half of it. But it's still $75,000 to hook up to the city's work. And I'm not asking you to confirm that. That's just really what I'm getting from this conversation. So I'm just putting it out there that doesn't seem terribly reasonable.
Other questions for Dustin? Megan.
Hi, like some have already been asked, but just really quick for my clarity, what city policy requires hookup to city sewer because Andrew's too close to the line?
It's actually not city policy, it's state law.
Okay.
And I can't name you the administrative rule off the top of my head, but through the Department of Environmental Quality, they'll state that anything within 300 feet of a public line should not be doing on-site septic.
Okay.
That's the Cliff's Note version of that.
Okay.
Multiple
That's
houses, multiple, that's essentially what's at play here.
okay. And then the annexation includes part of the right of way of 30th. Is that correct?
That's correct.
How far into the road?
It's adjacent to the house.
Oh, it's right of way, not the actual road itself.
Yes. Yeah, the right of way included. So this would take the city's right of way to the opposite side of the street and include the property. So approximately.
Okay.
35.
And is, like proposed frontage improvements, is that really working to meet like number 4 of the annexation policy? That the annexation serves interests of the entire community and not solely the annexed territory, or?
We start looking at the adequacy in the public facilities and the shared cost of applicant and public. Again, instances in the past where built a house, adding a dwelling unit would trigger the frontage improvements just as it would here. That's one of the policies that we're looking at. If this frontage is not improved by the property owner, it will, if it's ever to be improved, it then will be by the public. I mean, that's the sharing cost, convenience of the applicant. best interest of the public becomes our measuring stick.
And then the requirement that they can't connect to 30th, is that's for both tax lots?
Yeah, 30th is a minor arterial street, spacing requirement, and your transportation system plan says you should be accessing another street. Both these lots have access out into Rocky Road, a lesser classification. So direct access would not be to these streets. For car access, it would be to Rocky Road.
And I'm just gonna make, so 50 years from now, if someone else there, it's not owned by the same owner, does the 3004 still have access to the west, or is it only because it's owned by the same owner right now?
No, there's a partition and plat that has access and easement on there.
Okay, so there's legal
They-
access
They
to
have
both.
legal access. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Just a quick one, Dustin. You might not know the answer because, it's a history question. I guess, since 2016, have there been other examples of applicants coming here and essentially having it be cost prohibitive, and withdrawing because of something like a sidewalk being put in? Does this happen commonly? Is it?
No, the typically where you see this is for development.
Yeah.
I mean, that's usually the trigger. Is the status quo doesn't typically bring someone to be moved to annex into the city. The only exception issue that you've seen was just recently, and it was the property on Frankton that you heard where they had a failing system. They were actually not accessible, or they couldn't annex into the city, and they asked for some exception to the rule. But rare is it that we see more vacant property or one-offs coming before the city. So since 2016, you've seen Barrow Springs and Consolidated Cattle. That was both triggered by development interest as well as more developed property. St. Charles Place is pretty well built out, subdivided. These are more rural parcels that you should probably expect to see now that we're continuing to see the interest further out, but never seen anyone pull because of lack of public improvements to be installed.
Thank you. Mark. Again, Dustin, is it for him to connect this new bathroom to the new sewer line, there would have to be an application to build something within city rules because he'd already be annexed now, right? Is that
I
true?
believe the facility's already been permitted prior to it being. in city.
From the county?
Yeah.
With assuming the sewer.
Assuming, well, I think it was recommended that most likely you would not be able to continue to use, they question the longevity of the septic system.
Right.
But the permit is issued already, not based upon our approval.
Okay, and maybe Andrew can clarify whether he already has permission to build the other sewer connection or not. It seemed to me, having just done it, that when you apply for a building permit, you have to pay lots of money for paving alleyways and sidewalks and stuff. And that's the way we pay for infrastructure here. So if he wasn't gonna add another, a building permit thing, wishy-washy, but if he is adding something, then I'm not. So I veered from question. Okay, and maybe Andrew can talk about his existing permit for the new bathroom.
So we did get a building permit from the county. We started construction. The job's almost done. But my whole goal here is to make a preemptive strike if something goes south. I don't want to sit here and have a house that has a failing septic and, I can't replace the septic and I've got to move out for months on end till I have to go through this process to get hooked up to city sewer. I tend to try to be proactive in life, not reactive. I don't like to be in a fire drill. And so when the county sanitation officer says, it may fail, seems to me, well, the smart move is to hook up to city sewer. And we're talking about not just this building with one toilet, we're talking about hooking up my whole residence, which, feeds the septic system. So the building's pretty much done. And if if we can't figure this out tonight and I rescind I withdraw my application, I'll figure out something else and pump everything upstream. And I don't know, there's lots of options. There's composting toilets, there's combustible toilets, you name it. All of which I really don't want to do because they're the safest thing to do is to hook up to city sewer. And the responsible thing is to do is hook up to city sewer. But this crux that I'm in with having to spend an extra $75,000 to hook up to city sewer is something I cannot bear. So anyways, did I answer your question? Sorry.
Yes, thanks. Can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
So what is the half-life of your?
They said it's past its half-life, and I looked it up and it looks like, okay, so the septic can feel anywhere from 30 and 50 years. It's a pretty broad picture. I live on Rocky Road. Everything perks out there, but all the water slopes downhill there. It just does. And so like all set systems in that area, I don't know what's going to happen. And I'm just trying to be proactive because that's my home. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not moving up the ladder. This is, our home, and it has been for 30 years, and we're adamant about staying there. But I got to figure this out and do it in such a way that's financially feasible and equitable. So I would note that I was interested to hear that the public would bear the cost of sidewalks because the public utilizes the sidewalks. This isn't just a private, I understand what's going on here. I know the city can't afford to put the sidewalks in, but I've already said it anyways. I'll sit down.
Anything else for Dustin?
What I'm trying to understand is, it sounds like to me that the county has told you one thing, but that there's a state law that says something else, and that the gentleman's also being told something else by the city of additional requirements that need to be updated. And that's where I'm trying to figure out where is the miscommunication? Is this poor gentleman having to listen to 3 different entities that are telling him 3 separate items, or I'm not fully understanding myself. When he was applying for a permit to build this additional dwelling, was he told at that time by the county, hey, you're also going to have to be expected to pay X amount in additional fees?
No, I don't think that would be messaged by the sanitarian. And I think the rule, the state law that the sanitarian is looking at is, and what we have here is really more looking out in the future, that if you come into a situation where your septic fails, and a septic at, past its half-life for 30 years is starting to get to the point where it's getting to the end of its useful life. You're within 300 feet, you'll be required to hook up to sewer. And that I don't think is, that's only part of the message. That's not all the message. So. However, if we all stay in our lane and just kind of talk about silos, that's the complete message from that state law. It doesn't talk about the other features. So oftentimes planning gets to be the standard bearer of all the news, from engineering, from public works, from state law, from the sanitarian, and try to bring those in. So.
Megan.
I guess in this vein, and this is moving beyond Andrew, but is this just part of the messy, we've got urban growth boundary where county planning is doing it, but county planning isn't requiring folks to meet city standards for things like frontage improvements and everything. And so we get into these places where there are roads and other plenty of other properties that don't have compliant right of ways and everything to meet our needs as the city, but we're not the ones that permitted a bunch of this stuff.
Yeah, and I'd caution to say county planning is permitting this now.
Sorry, yeah.
I think it's a legacy, of how we managed this in the past. The idea that this would be rural and would always be rural. Okay, well, this is no longer rural. This is the urban growth area. And yeah, I would expect to see that legacy continue to show up and be issues that we talk about when we talk about annexing properties and terms and circumstances and obstacles. When we get out to these areas, we're going to see services that are non-existent. We're going to see infrastructure that is non-existent, non-compliant, and it's It's either gonna have to be resolved or not. In some issues, it's going to have to be resolved. You know, people will need to have sanitary sewer and water size to build properties. We will have to have streets built or build streets to satisfy the transportation system plans. We're gonna face this routinely. And the further out we go, this property is probably 400 feet away from the edge of the urban growth boundary, one property removed. The further the periphery we get, probably I would expect the more significant these issues become.
I mean, I guess that's part two of like, what are we gonna do for the next time around that this comes out? Especially as we continue to look at expanding and.
So I think we're getting pretty close to the deliberating time. We can still ask Dustin questions. He's there for us. So it is no small thing when I announce we're closing the hearing. This is an unusual situation. Usually we have somebody in a position and the applicant would be rebutting. In fact, in this case, the applicant is presenting. So I guess I would say, applicant, do you have anything final you'd like to say before we deliberate?
No, just to try to look at this in real terms. I mean, it's overwhelming to me that this is where I'm at. It truly is incredibly stressful that it's taken 5 months to figure this out. And I'm not good on stress these days. And this has been taking its toll. So please look at this in real terms. Put yourself in my shoes, your property, your home of 30 years. You're not a developer, you're an independent homeowner. How much should it cost you to hook the city sewer? Thank you.
So without objection, at this time I will close the hearing. Now we deliberate. To be clear, the deliberation is to arrive at a motion to recommend or reject this application for annexation. Doug.
Procedural question. Let's say we approve it. And he chooses to withdraw. Is he able to do that?
Abigail? Dan?
Yes, the thing is, what you would end up with is you approve it with conditions, kind of come down to conditions. It's an approvable application. He doesn't have to follow through. You can say skip it at that point.
Thank you. It also occurs to me that we could deny. Mark.
So, you know, I was on council in 2016 when we recognized that it had been done scary number of different ways up until that point. And we as council said we are going to fill up the UGA and we have to require the same rules on everyone. If they hook up to the sewer, they need to come into the city. They're already getting services with police and fire and things that aren't being paid for. So that's what annexation is supposed to do. So and I still think that is the best for the city, even though it's painful in every single application that we've had for the person applying. We don't have other ways to pay for infrastructure besides to ask the developers to do it. That is something that us as council talks about a lot. And I agree that if we can find tools to spread that differently, we should. But for right now, that is the toolbox we have. And I think that it's a good one. If I was the applicant, I would stick with my septic tank and but that is not for me to say. So I would encourage us to stick to our rule set, stick to the tools that we have while we want to make new ones. It's if you want to come in, that's what you got to do.
Grant.
I believe that we make policy for a particular reason. I don't think we should be constantly making exceptions to the policy. If we have these kinds of problems, perhaps our policy needs to be reevaluated and changed over time, especially if we can see down the road that this policy is going to create this headache over and over and over and over again for everyone in a particular area, especially for single family homeowners, not necessarily developers and that sort of thing. That's a policy discussion that we can have and discuss. However, making individual exceptions to that policy, I don't think we should be doing at all. And I agree with Councilor Zamor that everybody should, if they're taking advantage of city services, sharing that sort of thing, everybody should be chipping in generally.
Megan.
So I think, I mean, Gladys had said this earlier and Grant just said it of there's a larger policy conversation. I fully support the policy that was made in 2016 of you can't connect to sewer without annexation, because that had to be done to solve a way bigger issue. But yes, clearly we're seeing some other fallout from that. And yeah, there's clearly some cons, and I'm happy to have that larger conversation. I don't think right now in a quasi judicial setting is the place. With the existing policies we have. And I understand it is not great for the homeowner. I think I am supportive of the annexation for both the lots. Sidewalk on the one lot seems like fair trade to get it to a point that the city can take the annexation without massive cost to the larger community. Yeah.
So, I'm not sure, I guess I'm confused too. Are we really, this is about annexation, right? Hooking up the city sewer. So it seems to me like the conflict here is the sidewalk. It's not the connecting to the sewer. It's the requirement of building the sidewalk and the improvements. And that seems to be in part related to the building. That's where I get confused. Is it because of the annexation, or is it because of both? So as far as the policy thing, I'm not sure, what policy we're debating here.
Justin, can you clarify? I think the question Tim's asking is, what triggers the sidewalk requirement? The sewer hookup, the annexation, or the new outbuilding?
Well, right now it's annexation. That's the only question at hand. We have not, at the time of partition, we did not evaluate it. That would be a time that we would look at the adequacy of public facilities. In this instance, we did not look at that. It was done in the county. Then again, we would look at building. We have Hood River Municipal Code, and I believe it is Title 15 and Title 12 that talk about when you install a new dwelling, you will do your frontage. Again, we were not at the table when that happened. And then that goes on to talk about, again, at time of improvements. So if you have not necessarily a new dwelling, but a substantial upgrade where the public facilities and street frontage aren't up to date, we would then trigger it. Again, all this occurring in the county, none of those, we were not at the table for this. So this is, again, kind of a deferral to the point where it comes to the city. We look at the public facilities and the circumstance and saying they're not compliant. So, given the amount of ask, again, a non-development, we're not asking for the complete street to be done. It's not curb, gutter, swale, sidewalk extended to the end of the development. It's just put in the sidewalk. And it's not just put in the sidewalk, by the way. That is a public improvement. It's a public improvement that we as staff recommend that as a benefit to the public. A part of the goal of the city is a efficient transportation system project. Public, adequate, well-maintained. We think that's a commensurate trade-off to the ask of coming in and connecting after a deferral of non-improvements. So annexation is the only action here.
That's triggering the sidewalk. I guess I agree then that we do have a larger policy issue going forward. Because if every time that we're gonna annex a property that's, you know, adjacent to rundown facilities, is gonna cost the owners $75,000 to $150,000 to actually hook up this piece of work. And that's a big issue. So I'm not exactly, like, maybe that's not the issue for today.
And to add to that tangled briar, 2 weeks ago, we heard from Commissioner Babbitts, whose request is that we wholesale annex, in which case we would have a big group of people facing this situation. Doug, do you have?
No, I would just point out that if you were making improvements to your building within the city that doesn't have a sidewalk today, that's probably the thing I hear most about from people that are making improvements to existing non-conforming properties. You know, I lived on Columbia for some years where I wasn't able to do certain things because I couldn't conform. So things change over the years and properties have been around for a long time. And it does happen within the city too. It's not just because of annexation, it's because of changes to existing structures and so on and so forth. It's a complaint of many, certainly.
Mark?
I was just going to point out to council that we had an annexation earlier this year where, you know, near 22nd and Belmont, where we also required certain ingress and egress improvements and they did not have a development application in front of us at that time either. So it is not, this isn't point, you know, how do we get Andrew? This is how we've done annexations. So.
I would just agree with all the comments that have been made, but overall that we should have a larger policy discussion and that there should be, the county should also be upholding whatever policies we're setting here and that it's very clear from the beginning. Here's what you can expect moving forward.
After deliberation is a motion. We're currently deliberating. Megan?
So I have two, sounding like we're moving forward. I had two things from the planning commission stuff that if we are approving on our end, I'd want to change in our findings or what, and I'm looking at Dustin to tell me the right language for this, but planning commission had kind of had vague language about doing improvements. And I talked to Dustin earlier today of engineering had finalized the actual suggestion to just the sidewalk after planning commission.
Yep.
And so I'm wondering if we could clarify that in our findings or approval. I don't know. Tell me the words.
So at the time of the planning commission hearing, engineering hadn't finalized its recommendations. So there was a generic, you know, here's the non-compliance standard. Planning commission had a recommendation saying, whatever improvements occur, make sure they're proportionate to the amount of ask. That was a generalized statement because we had a generalized recommendation. Since that time, engineering has honed in its recommendation. It's included in your packet that talks about the extension of the sidewalk being the exclusive improvement. So reducing it from all the non-compliant features down to that. If you wanted, it's good to have a clear and objective condition. So if you wanted to narrow from what is a little more nebulous and flexible to that, we would hope that, or it's your ask, whatever, if you accept the engineering recommendation for that reduced improvement to incorporate it into your motion, we would incorporate your collective ask into the annexation agreement, those terms, those improvements. So within that, you have those conditions written now more explicit in the recommendation.
Okay. And then I got a little confused with the planning commission findings or conditions if tax lot 3004, the small one that's not built on, was included or not. And so I guess I would like to clarify that it isn't, like, if we're going to do this, and again, I understand the landowner may not follow through, but if we're going to do this, it doesn't make any logical sense that we would not take both at this time. So those are my two proposals.
Given the issue at hand, I want to understand. We annex both parcels and require sidewalk on both parcels. Is that your recommendation?
No, so annex both, my understanding is the engineering recommendation is just sidewalk on the northern one. And I am not proposing to change from engineering's recommendation.
Annex the second parcel.
Yeah.
Without. Doug. Oh, excuse me. Dan.
Quick comment, because I also kind of had to come into this reverse engineer to find out the genesis and what the current recommendation is. As I understand it, what we would recommend is bring both parcels in, require sidewalk improvements just along 3003. But in the future, if 3004 were to develop, then require sidewalk along its frontage too. And the reason why is kind of, I differ from Doug's comment earlier that properties within the city are just customarily required to come up to compliance. That's not necessarily true. We're doing this because it's an annexation and requires an annexation agreement. It's not considered a permit. We have limitations under the Constitution for permit conditions that we aren't subject to because it's a totally discretionary decision to annex or not. So that's why we require these typically at the annexation stage. Because once it comes in, it's very difficult to justify, to attach that kind of condition to a building permit, because these two lots exist. If they both come in, if 20 years from now, after Andrew has sold the property, I'm just guessing here since I live in Portland, it'll be further developed, and we would be limited in our ability to attach that kind of condition to just a building permit. So get it now, attach it as a condition to annexation so that in the future, if there is a development proposed on tax lot 3004, that they be required to do the sidewalk improvements, and that would be part of the annexation agreement that the applicant would agree to.
This is news to me. So if they built a house at whatever future time on the empty lot, we wouldn't require sidewalk?
They could argue it wasn't required.
Or it'd be disproportionately expensive. The same argument you're hearing now would be viewed differently if it was just a building permit versus an
If we've
annexation.
already annexed, right?
If we've annexed
That's
it
news
without
to
the
me that
condition.
you can't require sidewalk.
There's other circumstances too. Has it gone through a land use approval process? Have we required it? Have we conditioned it? Has it been appealed? So oftentimes we don't arrive at building permit to go through land divisions, we go through hearings. So for example, subdivision approval, Title 16, we will outline the conditions of approval, including do sidewalks, you do frontage improvements, etc. And those are built in. We bake those into the lot development. So at the time when we get to permit, this is not a surprise. We've gone through the conditions. We memorialize that in the conditions of approval, and the applicants, developers have accepted those. Waiting to permit to do these becomes increasingly challenging.
Legally.
So what I'm hearing is committee recommendation is to annex just the one. Megan's suggesting as long as we're here, let's take both. But Dan's saying, if we take the second undeveloped parcel in now, get that deed requirement or whatever we call it, so that it's clear that when it becomes developed, they have to put in the sidewalk, because building permit is not going to be enough teeth to do that.
Correct.
Are there other kinds of protections or to have our affairs in order if we were to choose to include 04 in the annexation?
No, originally, I think the recommendation is sidewalk on both of them, but I think we all agree that Andrew's argument, that's pretty expensive. He's not going to develop, so that can be deferred till the future. I think that was his suggestion. It made sense to me. And so that's why I would recommend bringing both and defer that improvement on 3004 until such time as it is redeveloped.
Which is the recommendation of staff currently, correct?
Yes.
We're not adding anything. Yeah, it's just that
Well, staff is not recommending annexing 04, I believe.
Yes, they are, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got lost.
Yeah,
Correct? Okay.
I am.
Okay. But it's adding the deed restriction is new information. It's not in the packet. Is that right?
I think it was in the engineering recommendation.
Yeah, that is a reduction of approval.
Okay. Other Other questions, comments? This is our time to just, the next thing that happens is a motion. So any more talking? Grant?
Just one thing, hypothetically, this question for Jen, kind of hypothetically, let's say tax law 3004 never develops and everything around it does. But we've never said, hey, we need a sidewalk there. And then there'll be a nice little gap in the sidewalk on the west side of town.
It wouldn't be that nice,
Exactly.
but
So then we just have a gap.
Or we improve it. Sidewalk infill project, not unusual, not cheap.
Right.
So it is the public right of way. We're not asking for private improvements. This would be just like we built intersections, traffic signals, road repairs would be an instance. Not as ambitious, but where we could go back through and backfill individual sidewalk gaps that haven't developed over time because of whatever circumstance. Predates, annexed in, whatever fell apart.
There's certainly plenty of examples we can look at. Yep, that's all I was asking about.
especially at the urban fringe,
Yeah.
that's where you have substandard facilities.
Yep, thank you.
Not easy. Right, I think I've done my job chairing. I'm waiting for a motion.
I'm gonna butcher this, but I move that the subject properties 3003, 3004, and the right of way be annexed into the city. And withdrawn with West Side Rural Fire Protection District. Adopting planning commission's findings, accept the amendment to update to the current engineering recommendations. And direct staff to prepare the annexation agreement and ordinance.
Moved by Counselor Saunders,
I'll second.
second by Counselor Stupina. Further discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
Opposed? Chair votes aye, motion passes. All right, moving on to the next public hearing. Is that right, Dustin?
Yes, sir.
We have a building public hearing script. I call to order a public hearing relating to modification of building permit fees. A quorum of the council is present, and I will now ask all councilors to disclose any bias or conflicts of interest and bias in this manner. Doug?
None.
Tim? Megan?
Nothing.
Mark?
Nope.
Gladys?
None.
Grant?
None.
I also have no bias to declare. Would anyone in the audience like to question any counselor on any disclosure, bias, or conflict of interest, or otherwise challenge the participation of any member of council? For audience members watching the video conference on Zoom, hang on, touching my little screen. Please use the raise hand feature in the webinar controls if you wish to speak. *9 to raise hand, *6 to toggle mute, unmute. In tonight's hearing, we'll use the following order of presentation. First from staff, second from anyone wishing to speak on the matter. And after everyone interested in this matter has had a chance to testify, we will close the record, deliberate, and render a decision. May we have the staff report, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Earlier this year, we heard and approved a resolution regarding your general schedule of fees for fiscal year 23-24. Unlike most of your other fees, building permit, structural, mechanical fees that we administer, in order to change those fees or modify them, we're required to notify the state building codes division and provide a special public hearing and opportunity for people to comment. We notified after your direction that council would be amenable to the first approval and modification of those fees in 14 years. We notified the state of our intentions and then continue to work with the state to do some tweaking to those fees, including categorical changes to make sure they lined up. The state asked that we do comparisons to Hood River County or surrounding jurisdictions for compliance. Hood River County will follow suit with some of these similar modifications. And as discussed in our budget hearing, this is not the end all be all solution, but it's certainly a first step to looking at the modified fees, looking at the fee structure and revenue structure, and creating a sustainable building program. So this is the opportunity for everyone in the public to speak regarding these fees. We have gotten concurrence from the state, and we'll notify them once we approve a subsequent resolution approving these fees. So tonight is for the hearing.
Thank you, Dustin. We will now hear from anyone wanting to speak on this matter. I'm looking at the Zoom list. Help me if you see something. Who's Jenny Marston?
Jenny is our labor attorney.
Great, thank you. Sorry, Jenny, I just didn't know. Okay, I see no one. We will close the record, deliberate and render a decision. Let's see. So we did the Zoom thing. Questions for staff? Grant.
I didn't have a question necessarily with the fees, just under the structural permit fees table, under the valuation amounts. How recently was that column updated or changed or looked at or anything?
Well, we had the recent update of the 3%.
Sure, but I mean, the valuation column itself.
Oh,
yeah.
the 0 to 500, 500 to 1.
Yeah, do those values pertain to anything? Is there a requirement that those are the particular fields?
I think, well, they're kind of typical. You would see that line up with the state system and how they categorically lump them together. Hood River County, the same breakdown. Wasco County, same breakdown. They seem to be pretty formulaic.
All right.
A lot of this and a lot of the numbering and even the terminology, we ran into a lot of terminology changes that the state wanted them called out this way. They wanted these names and, it is the state's building program administered through us, kind of like the statewide planning program. They love standardization and they love us to use the same words. So
Don't mind that. I just wanted to get clarification on those particular
the
amounts.
numerical amounts also very standardized.
Okay, thanks.
Tim.
No, and mine's pretty,
Standoff.
mine's pretty, oh no, I have to use. I want to see an application for a $500 building thing. I was expecting when this was on the agenda before we saw the packet that this would be, we're really going to be changing things dramatically, and I don't see. So my question is where's the dramatic changes that I'm not seeing when I look at the tables?
Not dramatic changes. I think this is really the first time, the dramatic changes, this being introduced in the city's fee structure in 15 years. I mean, I think that was enough drama for the initial, I would expect in the next year to have a better understanding of, now it's in the fee structure. It's been changed for the first time in 15 years. What is the cost and recovery, and how much do we continue to how much does revenue cost cover or not cost cover? This is my first fiscal year handling this. I'm handling it in a much more deliberate way, in terms of watching, changing numbers, evaluating the numbers, seeing how the system works. And I think next year we'll have a much different discussion.
Because
now more sophisticated with a year's worth of review.
Because this can come into our regular fee structure and annual review at this point. Okay, thank you.
So for the mechanical fees, is that related to remodeling? Or those new fees or new construction?
Both. Yeah, remodel, it covers remodeling fees if you wanted to change out your appliances. Mini split shows up in here, a new category, mini split, not available 15 years ago. Furnaces for new and remodels, all covered.
I'm glad you brought up the mini split, because I really seriously question whether we should be permitting wood stoves in new construction at all. I'm just going to throw that out there. That just doesn't seem like a good idea to me.
I want to understand what you mean, Tim. You mean we should not allow people to put them in, or we should allow them to go in without any paperwork?
I think we should not allow them to go in.
Thank you.
And at the very least, if they're going to go in, they should cost a lot of money, because
Other questions for, or, questions for staff? Grant?
I have more of a future question. Noticing that the fee schedule as you go up in terms of dollar amount valuation, the incremental fee per thousand goes down. Does that, I would imagine that the impact of the fee on a $10 million house as a percentage is a whole lot less than the impact on a $50,000 or $500,000 house. The percent of the fees as a percent of valuation changes significantly. That may not align with creating affordable housing, for example. So I was curious in the future if there was any correlation or relation and those things in the future. So that's not a question for now. That could be later. That could be later. But I was just looking at that. I was just looking at that map, and that was a question I had for after we have some more data around that.
So that's interesting. Like, for example, if you build a house that's less than $275,000, there's zero permit fee, for example, to incentivize cheaper house, less expensive houses. Right? That would be in fact a policy with an impact perhaps.
There's actually a real regulatory issue here of, the point of the permit fee is to evaluate and to cover the cost. So just because you have $1 million home doesn't necessarily mean it's double the labor of doing a 500,000. It has, it might have more foundation. It may have fancier bathrooms, but we do want, we're really, because you grow a permit exponentially in cost, doesn't mean the labor and the cost that we incur to cover it goes up. And that's actually a really important part of justifying the fee, is that this is not a profit center. We are intending to cost recover. So that we can get into the equity conversation and regression pricing later, but there is a reason why those numbers start to decrease as the value goes up.
Thank you. If there are no further questions for staff, I will close the hearing and we will deliberate. Are we ready to close the hearing? I close the hearing. Let's deliberate. And just for perspective, some entities choose to start with a motion and then discuss the motion and then vote. I don't do that, but if you would prefer that, I'm fine with that. But I don't want people to think that once we make the motion, it's all done. Like, you can talk before or after the motion. Doug?
I'm in favor of doing this. I don't really have any other comments to add.
Thank you.
I move to approve the proposed fee building fee modification for fiscal year 2023-24.
Moved by Grant,
I'll second.
second by Megan. Discussion. See, we don't really talk about it after. Some people do. Also, just saying, Arthur the other day and I were visiting. Robert's rules only permits 2 times each of us may address a certain item, so that there's like, sorry, you already talked twice, which I don't also think is a very good idea, but some people do. All right, any further discussion on this motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye, motion passes.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Dustin.
We will be back with a resolution memorializing or whatever vehicle is necessary, and we'll put that on consent.
Brilliant. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. I would entertain a motion.
Can we pull the OLCC license? out,
Number 2 is
please?
going to be pulled off by request. The consent agenda as modified, I would entertain a motion.
I would move we approve the consent agenda without number 2.
Moved by Megan,
Second.
second by Grant. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye. Gladys, you want to talk about number 2?
I do. So at our last meeting, during council call, had just talked about some of the challenges that have been addressed, like in Donnie's police report that he submits every week, Carrie and some of her findings around the number of DUIs. I recognize that this body doesn't necessarily approve the OLCC license, but I have had a brief conversation with Abigail around where are there barriers that just don't make for public transportation, especially in the evening hours, more available? What do we need to do to ensure that we have Lyft, that we have Uber, but that we have transportation options for folks. And until I feel that I better understand, I will continue to abstain from all OLCC licenses moving forward. So there's a lot of work that we need to do to understand, who technically owns this. I also recognize that we may not technically own this and that it may just be for our transportation partners. So until there's a more understanding of what is it, what are the barriers, I will continue to abstain from all OLCC licenses.
Thank you, Glenn. Mark.
Yeah, Gladys and I talked about this a little bit, and I won't abstain, but I do like the idea of adding a policy cover letter to everything that goes back to the OLCC, saying it's not enough just to say, okay, here's, we approve and there's no other comment. It sort of says that there are societal stuff. There's, our town doesn't have a good system for getting people rides home so they don't end up in chiefs, the back of a police car, because that even though we do a really good job of that, it's not our preferred solution, right? The preferred thing would be they have rides home and they use them. So the idea, and it might not be for tonight, is sort of we approve these OLCC things, but it goes back with a cover letter saying this isn't what, we are asking the state to pay for some of these services that aren't in the city's ability to do, that would make it easier to have OLCC licenses. So that's my 2 cents.
Megan.
I definitely agree. We need to still work on transportation issues. I mean, in the realm of like OLCC is not anyone at the state that would be providing money or other services to address this. I think having us engage on the policy level with the legislature and the governor's office, great, but I like a letter to OLCC doesn't seem like the right forum, I guess.
I'm kind of friends with Matty, the taxi cab EV guy, and he's talked about the 9:30 and later taxi cab shift is no fun. It's not like the best, in the medical field, we call it a good payer group. It's not like a lovely payer group because, people after 9:30 are not like your favorite customer. And so I agree that OLCC is not going to help us with this. It does feel like I want to complain to somebody. And just to be clear, Chief, I appreciate your folks keeping everybody safe and enforcing the laws that we've all agreed to. It's not like, well, these drunk, don't stop them. But if people are going to drink and drive, that's only sort of our fault. Doug.
Well, since we're having this conversation, I brought this up many weeks ago. I'm really encouraged to hear, Councilor Rivera also feeling the same concern that I do. I think that drunk people make bad decisions, and we allow a lot of drinking here legally. I don't think that's an excuse to break the law, but I've talked to a lot of business owners here that share the concerns that they would like to protect their staff from, horrible situations. They would like to protect their patrons from horrible situations, and not being able to get somebody in a cab because they're not available is a common theme. And I do deeply appreciate the work of the police to catch people that are driving drunk. And I hope they catch all of them, but I think we should turn off the faucet and create less drunks that are, giving them the decision to make bad decisions. I know it's tremendously difficult as a bartender and a server to be able to recognize visual impairment. And I think that being a resident of Hood River, I think they do a really good job. And I think they're catching everybody that they can humanly catch with the amount of people that we have drinking in the community. So I'll just echo the sentiments that I think it's becoming an issue. We're seeing, a lot of people talking about this, not just in the community, but in the legal community, et cetera. And it should be talked about and elevated in terms of our priorities, I believe.
I will just raise up that something I do as the year goes on is I start making a list of stuff I'm going to suggest we consider at our goal setting in December. Because if we told Abigail, hey, top priority, figure out a way to provide our transportation, then they could spend some time doing that. I'm going to make a note that this is something we want to talk about and the staff is trying to do lots of things. Maybe we would want to get involved in the taxi cab business in some way, which right now we're like, hey, that's something we don't do.
Yeah, and I
The market doesn't, the magical market doesn't seem to be solving this problem for us.
Right, and it's, and being that we have a 2-year work plan now. And I think all of us have talked to staff that have been talking about this issue, are fully conscious that we don't want to blindside staff with a bunch of work. So we should be having, I think, on a per cases basis, I don't think we should be just, oh, shiny thing about, issues that pop up, but this seems to be keeping, to be thematically coming up more and more and more.
Megan.
Doug, I believe you are a rep on the Visit Hood River, and I think in the realm of talking to the state, great. This seems like an area that it would be really nice that maybe not all of this is on the city, but is potentially with partners or actually taking the lead by other partners who are perhaps advertising and or promoting the use of our town in some way.
Yeah, well,
If you can spread that message.
yeah, it certainly is a destination management issue. I think that Visit Hood River is shifting a bit of their focus towards being a good tourist, being a good visitor, what it means to do that. And I know there's not a lot of advertisement of the fact that this is, quote unquote, lax place where you can enjoy a beverage, outside, et cetera. That's not promoted. I think there are some, yeah, it's sparingly, not by Visit Hood River is what I'm saying. Yeah, the establishments might choose to do that, et cetera, but it's not, as far as I can tell, a policy of VHR to say, go out and drink on the streets. So that's what
Mayor.
Drinking on the corner who are driving drunk. Tim after Abigail.
Yeah.
Did somebody say mayor?
I did, but to, Counselor.
Because that's another thing, we've got establishments, this better get them involved. In finding safe ways for patrons to come on.
Yeah.
And I would just add a personal story that I've been hit by not only one drunk driver, but two.
Oh, Jesus.
And one of the times my job was actually broken.
Oh, I'm so sorry about that.
Twice. So it's like as a person.
Abigail.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to suggest I'm hearing a consensus that you'd like to see some additional information and conversation about this. I wanted to maybe in the effort of time, maybe say we can put this on a future agenda to have a full conversation. The other pieces we have not noticed this particular piece. So have a more public conversation about this and give us as staff a chance to do a little bit more research. Dan and I talked about this earlier today about identifying what barriers are in our code and then coming back to you and seeing if this is something you want staff to work on or not. So I just wanted to direct you back to you of a specific OLCC question today, but I am definitely hearing a desire to have a bigger conversation about transportation networks. Is that what they're called? Transportation carrier networks, I think, TCNs. Said we were doing our homework earlier today. So.
Right, but you aren't the first city to consider this. You've got a particular problem. Other cities have had this and they've solved it. It's the computer age, so
Thank you.
we can figure it out.
Thank you.
Gladys, thanks for bringing that up and thanks for all the follow on, everybody. Let's see. So where we are actually is on a liquor license application. Megan,
So I would move we approve the OLCC permit application for Horse Feathers.
moved by Megan. Second by Tim. Further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes. Thank you, everybody. Good conversation. Thank you, Abigail, for reminding us that stuff we talked about is supposed to be noticed and on the agenda. So veering we're allowed to veer, but we're not supposed to something. Action items. Monica.
Hello, thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me. Tonight, we have 2 action items on the agenda. One is our personnel policy update, and the other is the Public Works Union contract. With me tonight is Jenny Marston, our labor attorney. And do you have her? There she is. Jenny, please introduce yourself and take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Monica. So for those of you who haven't met me, my name is Jenny Marston. I'm an attorney at the firm Peck Rubinoff in Hatfield. And joined the firm when Kathy Peck, the city's former labor attorney, retired, and I have assumed the bulk of her practice, and which means I get to work with you all. And prior to being at the firm, I also was actually at the city of Beaverton and worked with your city manager, Abigail, for several years. And what I'm here to talk with you about tonight is, while I'm currently helping Monica and Abigail with bargaining with both the fire units and public works, what we're actually here to talk about tonight is updating the Family Medical Leave Policy 9.4 to take into account Paid Leave Oregon, which was that law that was passed by the Oregon legislature in 2019 to establish paid leave for employees who have who experience either qualifying illness or injury, or birth, adoption, or fostering of a child, or they have a family member who has a qualifying injury or illness. And I worked with Monica on getting the city's policies in place for Paid Leave Oregon. The program is scheduled to start on September 3rd. And, you know, and Monica and I working together, we realized that the city's policy 9.4 had a lot of things that needed to be updated to take into account, particularly recent changes that occurred with the Oregon Family Leave Act. And so we thought probably what would be easiest is to do kind of a complete replacement of the prior policy, and to make sure that it was legally compliant with the current law. So that is what you have. I also put together a bullet point summary, which explains how the new policy is different from the old policy, with page references as well to help with your review. The updated policy has been shared with all three of the city's unions. The Public Works Association accepted the updated policy as part of negotiations. We're in productive conversations with the fire union around the policy. And then the Police Association informed me late last week that they don't, as of yet, have any concerns with the policy, and they knew that it was coming to you all for your consideration and approval tonight. So with that, I guess I welcome any questions that you might have about the policy or any other information I can provide about Paid Leave Oregon.
Thank you, Jenny. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Questions for Jenny or Monica? Hearing none, I think the next step is a motion. This is an action item. We're on page 87.
I move to approve the updated personnel policy, Article 9.4 FMLA OFLA PLO. And this article supersedes any previously approved FMLA articles.
Moved by Megan,
Second.
second by Grant. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Opposed? Chair votes aye. Thanks for your good work on this, Monica and Jenny. Appreciate it. Now, are we moving on to Public Works Association contract? Is that the next item?
We are.
Still you, Monica? Still you, Jenny?
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jenny.
Well, so we negotiated a 3-year agreement with the Public Works Association. I say negotiations went really smoothly with the association. This is the association and the city have a really, really good relationship, and I think a history of talking through issues as they come up, which makes bargaining go really smoothly. And the agreement in front of you tonight is a 3-year agreement that provides for some changes to the compensation structure that the parties have been talking about for many years, to make the system, the compensation system and how employees move through it a little more similar to that for other employee groups. And then we also agreed to, for the out years of the contract, so years 2 and 3, that the employees would receive a COLA comparable to what was negotiated with the fire union the last time around of a CPI, Consumer Price Index, with a minimum of 2% and a maximum of 4%.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I could add some comments,
Please do.
I simply want to say thank you to Monica and to Jenny and to Public Works Director Rich Rice and Supervisor Adam Schmidt and the union bargaining team. There were things in this contract that that should have been handled a couple years ago, but because of the change in the city manager and then the change in Public Works Director and then another change in Public Works Director, they got pushed off. And so that group came together and did some of this restructuring piece before they went into negotiation. So they really worked together as a team before we came to the table in that kind of adversarial role. And I just really appreciate that the thoughtful work that this group did to create a contract that I think really respects the values and the priorities of the union, and also is responsible for the city. So they did a fantastic job, and I'm super thankful.
So nice to hear. Thanks, everybody, and good job.
Thank you.
Okay, I would entertain a motion. Is that where we are?
I move to approve the 2023-2026 CBA between the City of Hood River and the City of Hood River Public Works Association and authorize the city manager to sign and implement the agreement.
By Gladys,
I'll second.
second by Megan. Discussion, Mark.
Yeah, I just want to thank staff and including Monica and Jenny and Public Works for coming together and getting this done with just zero council policy setting drama. And it says a lot to how we work together as a team, or you guys work together as a team. And it's super appreciated because it lets us concentrate on other things that we should be concentrating on, and hopefully everyone is happy and on we go. So thank you.
Thank you.
Gladys.
I just want to take a quick moment to thank all the folks within Public Works and both of you and staff as well for all the work you all do to maintain the city and keep it looking beautiful and running efficiently and all that. So appreciate everyone's efforts.
Thank you. I will pass that on. And we did ask if anyone was available tonight, and they were not. Some on vacation, some working. But I will say, Jenny, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe from start to finish, this was negotiated in 8 hours. Not all in one day.
Yeah.
But it was a wonderful team effort. We put a lot of work into it as a group, as Abigail said, probably starting last July. To get to this point, when we got to the table, we knew what we were sharing, what everybody was asking for, what the city needed, what the citizens needed out of Public Works, and we accomplished it really quickly. So yeah, nice job to Public Works.
Thanks, Monica. Other discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor?
Yes.
Opposed? Chair votes aye, motion passes. Q4 supplemental.
That's good.
Thank you, Megan.
So what is before you is resolution 2023-11. This is the Q4 supplemental budget resolution for the 2022-23 fiscal year, so our current fiscal year. As per Oregon law, it is municipalities cannot spend funds that have not been appropriated. And all the funds must remain in balance. And so this is the Q4 adjustments for this fiscal year in order to keep the budget in compliance. I should note it will be our policy to do this more regularly. So there are several changes here, significant changes through this. But again, it's because there have not been any previous supplemental budget adjustments. Just in summary, there are a number of funds that are impacted. The general fund adjusts the beginning fund balance for higher than anticipated department expenses, and then also has adjustments to appropriations for police payroll expense.
fire payroll expense and vehicle and facility repairs, planning legal costs, municipal wage expense, parking fees and equipment purchases, and expenses related to the hydro project that were not anticipated at budget adoption. The road fund recognizes again higher than estimated balances, beginning balances, and the increased construction costs for the traffic realignment at Cascade and Raymond. The water fund makes an adjustment for a contribution to the USDA short-lived asset replacement reserve account. The sewer fund makes an adjustment to the Jacobs professional services contract for the management of the wastewater treatment plant, which was approved on May 8th, 2023 by this council. There's restricted revenue funds, again, recognizes higher than budgeted lodging tax receipts, and then appropriates the corresponding remittance to the Chamber of Commerce for tourism promotion. The internal fund, the internal services fund, recognizes higher than anticipated IT expense within the administration department and appropriates additional fund transfers from the general fund for compensated absence payouts that are related to several unanticipated retirements and other payouts from the compensated absence fund. And then lastly, the agency fund makes an adjustment for higher than anticipated billings for water, and then to balance the budget makes a corresponding decrease in sewer billings. These are all remittances to the state of Motion. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer.
So if we were in high school, run a city class / financial, what grade would we be getting? Are these big adjustments or are these like, hey, this is what happens?
I would say in most instances, this is just what happens. I think that these adjustments are larger because we're doing one quarterly, right? We're doing one Q4 adjustment. So presumably, next year we will do these quarterly and they'll be less significant.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
Questions? Great.
Mentioned part of the answer. How far back in time do these adjustments, are the reconciliations for these adjustments? Is it the entire budget year?
It's the entire budget year.
Okay, so this list would be roughly what our recon would show every year, just over one period of time instead of the entire year.
Yeah, if there was an aggregation of the quarterly budget changes, that's what this would end up being, right?
Assuming that we're off on our budgeting about the same amount, yeah.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Chris. I mean, it's tough, right? We're having to spend more for everything and that's what we're getting here. Does our end of year, does it match up with the beginning year balance for 23-24 that we went through, or are you seeing differences in that? So the very beginning of your thing is we actually had beginning fund balance was more and we're adjusting it in this year's budget. Are we set up for okay beginning fund balance for 23-24?
Yeah, and actually, if you look at the resolution, I'll reference the general fund.
Mhm.
So you'll see that the original budget looked to start the year with a beginning fund balance of about 3.8 million, and then end the year with a ending fund balance of about 3.5 million. Right? Instead, we've started the year with a beginning fund balance of about 4.15. Right, there were some increases in expenses. We were able to apply some contingency, and there were some additional funds that were received. And we anticipate that the unappropriated reserve balance will be about 3.5 million. So not a significant change from where we expected on the original budget.
And sort of what we're planning for the next years. We're not starting in a little bit of a hole, right?
No. And if you look through the resolution, you'll note that the unappropriated reserve balances are either higher or consistent with where the original budget was.
Cool. Thank you.
Just yawning. Okay, I thought you were yawning and then asking. Doug. Yeah. No. Anybody else for a yawn? Any other questions for Chris? And I would just point out, like one of the things we're doing is authorizing 50,000 more to VHR because we got 200,000 more in and we have to give some to them. So that's like, that adjustment is a win.
That's good.
Okay, there is a motion on page 141, is it? No.
Move that city council approve resolution 2023-11 to make appropriations and adjustments to the adopted budget for fiscal year 2022-23.
Moved by Grant,
Second.
second by Gladys. Discussion. All in favor?
Yeah.
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye, motion passes. Thank you, Chris, for your good work.
Thank you, council.
Chief. Oh, you know what? I usually, sorry, chief,
You're good.
I blew right through the break that I'm pretty good at remembering. Let's take a break.
This is gonna be a long one.
$72 Thank you. Ami's getting us set up. And and I think we all received some input from a resident, Susan Crowley. Susan, I see that you're online. I would love for you to give commentary after the chief talks, if you would like to. So I'll call you, Susan, after the chief talks.
Excellent. And as you know, this is just discussion tonight. We're not asking for any action. Our goal is to get feedback from you. We look at this as kind of, we designed this where we believe we like where it's at, we leave it, Dan, myself and staff. But again, this session, we just want to feedback and we tweak, and also community members. We thought this is a great way, not going for first reading or some kind of expectation, but hopefully we're getting feedback from the community and what they would like to see just over those. So that's why we're here today. So in 2022, it was one of the goal priorities of the city council, to look at code enforcement. I gave a presentation, it was the end of 2022, speak to them for the year, kind of given what happens as far as code within our community. During that conversation, I think Mr. Zandler stated, as far as from the parking regulations and the concerns that he gets from constituents, as myself and parking and the city as a whole. Our current code had some loopholes that we discussed during that time that it wasn't a very quick action. Vehicles could be parked for months too. We have some in our community that's parked in the same location for years. I mean, it's amazing that, where they're parked, but we can't do anything about it. So working with staff and working with Dan, we came up to it with an idea of a 72-hour parking ordinance, which is we're not inventing the new wheel. We're not the cusp. This is occurring in many communities. We're just wanting to adopt it into our code as a tool in our tool belt to utilize for those difficult situations that we're not able to address today. So that's where we're at. I'm going to kind of pass it over to Dan as far as legality of this. He put two different codes together to create this one new code.
So what brought this to my attention was a particular problem of basically derelict vehicles being parked for a long time in people's neighborhoods. And so I worked with Marty and Chief to, first of all, what do we have in the code that addresses this issue? So as close as it came, and I think this is at the last page of your packet, the current section 8.20.010, and it talks about parking in excess of 72 hours, but it has to be rusted, wrecked, junked, partially dismantled, a lot of kind of derelict vehicle type things that don't necessarily, that's your basic junk vehicle. And my sense was that description didn't give the police enough clear and objective teeth to deal with any of these complaints, because this comes to the police department, the neighbors complaining that this van has been parked on my street for 2 years. And sometimes people are living in it, sometimes they aren't. And so it's not, my neighbor is parked for 3 days in front of my house, I want to move. That's not the issue. And that's not what the police department wants to do any kind of enforcement on. And so what's proposed here is what's more standard in a lot of cities, 72 hours. And so the proposal we took to address this issue is, just these things parked on the street for that long, that, this would be kind of generally speaking complaint driven, or sometimes these are notorious kind of nuisance situations. This would give the police, the objective here is to give the police kind of license to knock and talk and say, look, this is what's the plan here? You can't really stay here like this. You've got in the code, you've got 72 hours and you have to move. Do you have a place to go? That sort of thing. Because that's the problem. If it's just somebody has dumped their junk car on the street, then this would allow you to, tag it, put the notice on, wait a bit, and then tow it if there's no response at all. It's not to facilitate kind of neighbor battles. So that's the objective here. The other thing we're up against is development in federal law, case law over the past couple of years that prohibits local governments from criminalizing kind of basic life functions like camping on public space. And so it's very difficult a lot of times these are kind of camping situations in these derelict RVs. And so you have to be kind of careful about criminalizing basically camping on the street. And so you don't want to necessarily be doing that. And there are a couple of legal ways to do that. Portland City Council last week struggled with how to prohibit camping in public spaces without running afoul of that. And it's camping is okay, but you got to get the tent out of there during the day. So that's how Portland has addressed this situation. It's just not easy. And you don't have a huge problem in this city. But I know Deschutes County is working on getting rid of a very big homeless camp that has a lot of derelict vehicles. And to the extent they can move, they might move north. And so you might want to kind of think about this going forward and give the police departments some more tools to address the situation.
Chief, is this going to give your people the tools they want, or will this be a useful tool for your people?
Absolutely. This will be a useful tool because right now we've got some code in place that really we can't address those long-term, that our vehicles are legally able to be driven. They have license, registration, and insurance. The tires are up, but we can't ask them, as Dan said, to move on, to relocate and not stay in one spot for a month at a time. Whereas Mr. Labadie, I think, came about a month ago. He's got that vehicle that's parked on one of his rentals. It's been several years that vehicle's been there. Again, it fits within our code today that we can't address that to move on.
I guess other side of that, to the point, Dan said this isn't supposed to be neighbors having a war with their neighbors. As written right now, could it be used for that? I mean, if this is complaint based and a neighbor keeps calling about their neighborhood, I don't see anything that wouldn't get those people in trouble.
We always fear that, but I think what we look at is common sense when if this does get voted in eventually for the city, is we will have a process in place that we're not going to go out there initially and just take it in tow. Our current process now is we will get a complaint from someone. We actually, as a city, go out and look at the complaint. And that's when we start our 72 hours. It's not that, hey, this has been here 2 weeks, because sometimes their vision of 2 weeks is, maybe a day. We'll go out, and that time we sticker it saying you're in violation of, right now we use the abandoned unlicensed vehicle. And then we attach the code and let the property owner of the vehicle know that it's in violation. We put a ticket on there, but it's just a warning ticket. And then our goal within 72 hours that vehicle owner or property owner actually takes care of it. If not, then we go to the next step of actually trying to locate the registered owner and see if we can get it moved. Our whole goal is to get things to continue to move through our streets.
But if you are in one of our houses that doesn't have off-street parking, you go on vacation for a week, it gets stickered on day 3 of your vacation.
We know, and we've voiced it to Abigail, east side of Hood River, there's no to very little off-street parking.
Right.
Common sense would say they built this on a hillside that's undeveloped. We understand.
Okay, I mean, I'm glad there's discretion from the police department, but it feels weird to write policy that is relying on discretion versus we have written good policy that would make sense to any objective person reading it, I guess is where I'm aiming.
Yeah.
And that now I'm moving into deliberation and not question, so I'm gonna stop, but.
All right, I know that Susan submitted some testimony. Susan, if you'd like to join, Ami, how do we, I see a hand raised. So Ami, if you can do the magic. Susan, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your engagement.
Hi, thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay, good. Susan Crowley, 411 12th Street, Hood River. We live in an old neighborhood, and many of our neighbors don't have any on-site parking. Or if they do have on-site parking, it's limited. And most households these days that have more than one adult have more than one car, and a lot of people need those cars to get around and to work. So that's no surprise to anyone. So I think the problem with this ordinance as it's, or this proposed ordinance as it's drafted, is it does, the objective is great. I certainly would support it because there are few people who haven't been disturbed by proliferation of camping on our streets. but it inadvertently sweeps in permanent residents who don't have the luxury of on-site parking or garages. So I think there must be ways to address this, but as written, and that's what you go by, you know, it's a law. It basically says no person, that's no person, shall store a motor vehicle for more than 72 hours in the public right of way. And if it's on the public right of way for more than 72 hours, that's on its face, prima facie, you know, evidence that it's being, quote, stored. So it sweeps us all in, unless we have a garage. And so what we need to do is find some explicit way in the language to make clear that permanent residents are not included in this. So I sent a written piece of testimony earlier. It should be an email submission. And I proposed some initial language for you to think about, just some things you could add to what's in the ordinance right now. Maybe you can wordsmith with Dan if you agree with this in terms of policy. But basically, you could ask permanent residents who might want to be protected from perhaps irritated neighbors that they can come and apply for a permit, and it would be given as a matter of right. But it's just bad public policy to give administrative personnel, no matter how much you trust them and like them, just unlimited, unfettered discretion without any standards to issue permits. So you could let people who live here permanently to come in, show their residency, and get a permit that they could then affix to the vehicle. And they know they would be clear of having to worry about this. But the fact remains, if I leave town for more than 3 days, I am liable under this draft. And I'm sure that's not what you intend. I'm sure that's not what the people of Hood River would want. But that is the way the language reads, and you need to pay attention to the words because the laws are the words.
Thank you very much, Susan. I appreciate your input.
Thank you.
I'm thinking about Mr. Lavity, who's my neighbor, and I rolled by with my wife yesterday, like, oh, let's go check out the problem on 3rd Street. Like, I'm not feeling very successful about it. And there are the two vans. If I were to get a sticker, and then I could go park in front of Megan's house for 6 months with my sticker, like, that doesn't seem like the way we want that to go. You know, different people have different amounts of curb, like, oh, I have 100 feet of curb, I can store 6 vehicles because it's my house. Can I complain when it's in front of his? I understand. I guess I'm sure we all understand. It's very, very difficult. But I feel like Pie with the Mayor, somebody complained about the, oh my gosh, it's so frustrating. You guys, and they're like, oh yeah, I talked to Marty, I talked to the chief. I'm like, oh, okay. So Mark. Yeah.
When we did the downtown parking study, we were talking about, you know, cars could sort of be mushed out into Cascade and Columbia, you know, as far as 8th or 9th. And one of the things that came up is like, well, we have a thing in code that allows us to have a neighbor sticker
Parking
system.
permit.
Yeah, but we just haven't had to implement it and have it. So that is still a truism, right?
It's on the books.
I mean, so one way is to say, okay, give them this tool. We do have this alternate tool that's just not implemented, but it's already in code, which is a neighborhood, which would prevent you from parking in front of my house anyway.
Yeah.
But it could have controls that we could add another layer. Is that a true statement?
Yes, we could create a program that. I believe in the code, it says that it's initiated by neighbors to create a district. At which point I think, and they need, I think it's unanimous consent of all of the neighbors of whatever. And I don't think it talks about how a district is formed or how big that district would be. But then the city would administer a program that would issue permits for that group. It doesn't, it says, and we would kind of create rules about hours. And, I would say, I don't know if you want to go to anyone who like lives in a certain area and now has permanent rights to the spot on the block, or if you want to say 72 hours generally citywide, but if you have a permit like this, you could have a month or 2 weeks, or whether you wanted to make that unlimited or not would still need to be something figured out in that permit piece.
And I'm not advocating it as at the get-go, but just having Having future options.
Yeah, it's on the books. And I'm not aware of any place in the city where it's currently being used. So.
Has that been used?
I maybe just need a step back of like, what is the actual problem or behavior we're trying to change? Is it functionally camping on public right of way? Is it abandoned vehicles? Is it just I'm parking in front of my neighbor and my neighbor hates it? What is the problem we're trying to solve? Because I'm having a hard time knowing if like 72 hours is the right way to address it, or if that's overkill for what the actual issue is.
And maybe Chief, do you want to start? And then I'm going to add some comments as well.
Well, I think Dan did earlier as far as, legally what we can do if that's a place of residency as far as your home. That helps that. There's several RV type vehicles in our community that kind of bounce around, stationed for a long time until you kind of massage them to ask them, and eventually they'll move up the street or down the street a little bit. We get complaints regularly as far as vehicles that are parked in their neighborhood longer than 72 hours. And that's very common. It's not normally, Mr. Lavity's is kind of a different situation. But the common one is, this vehicle's been parked here for several weeks. No one's been around it. We don't know what's going on, but it's no expired tags, tires are flat. So we can't address and do anything about it.
And that's like, it's not doing anything wrong. It's just there.
It's parked there for a substantial amount of time. We have vehicles in our community. I don't think they've been swept underneath with our sweepers as long as I've been working here. And I can take you to a spot today, right now, to show you, this is occurring. Again, the individuals live in the city, keep their tags up, tires are up, but it just sits storing on city property, really, at the end of the day.
So I would add to that just one conversation I had with neighbors on Montello this last week of a van that someone not on that street, but not far away, is working on a van. And so it has been parked on that street for about a year. I don't know if it moves once in a while, but someone is working on it using the street as kind of their workshop area. They work on it, then they take their tools back to their, to their house. But the other piece that I see is the difficulty of snow plowing in the winter when, we know that we have a number of folks in town who have summer here and then winter somewhere else and leave their car out on the city street for 3 months or so while they're away. And that makes snow plowing and street sweeping very difficult. So that's the other tool that I would want to point out, in addition to camping and junk vehicles, as Dan has explained.
I can't put my fingers on it now. If I had my computer, I could. I think there's a section of our code that says you can't sleep in an RV on the street. Am I making that up? And how does that dovetail with this?
I don't know that that's enforceable with current federal case law.
So yes, it's in our code.
Yeah.
But we probably can't enforce it. Okay, thank you.
I think you still have the move.
You can make a move, but can't, it's a basic life function. You see it in Portland, people just sleeping in their cars.
Yep. Gladys.
I will just echo the concerns that have been brought up, that this is very broad language to say no person shall. I also don't want to create additional work for city staff of having, if I park my car in front of Mark's house for 3 weeks, that Mark has got to do this labor to prove that I'm, a resident of Hood River. So I worry about the broad language that's being used. I recognize that we're most likely doing this because of some of the safety concerns that Mr. Labadie brought up around, propane tank, and that it wasn't monitored and whatnot, and that the safety concerns with that would bring. So I would see that as a valid reason to ensure that that vehicle is moved or brought up to date. But this gives me pause, understanding well intentions behind it and ensuring that, we're giving you and your staff the tools that you all need to be successful. But this just gives me a lot of pause.
It says no vehicle. If I park my boat in front of your house for 6 months, what happens? That's included.
So yeah, we did two types. We had boats, trailers, as one ordinance, and then we had vanities. We can combine those two. Now, boat attached to a vehicle, that short term, okay, once you take it off the hitch and park a trailer or a boat, then it becomes illegal.
Because I think in our community that there's a lot of that going on too. Like it's like the fundamental, like I'm allowed to work on my van on the street. I'm allowed to store my boat on the street. I, Paul, do not have a garage or a driveway. I park on the, you know, I move, I try to be conscientious on the snow plowing, but I understand.
I mean, I just think of my father. My father owns a variety of vehicles that he keeps them all insured and entitled and whatnot, but they are on a public street and this would impact him. And he's got to figure out where he's going to put his 2 additional vehicles that don't fit within, you know, the space that is allowed. So I think about that and
just to understand, he only has to figure something out if the neighbor calls him in, right? Like it's not, the chief's not out there.
I know the neighbor has called him in, so I think of that, right? Like
the neighbor called.
The neighbor has called and they haven't been able to enforce that. This would allow for that to happen and he would have to move 2 of those vehicles. So again, this just gives me pause. I understand the well-intentioned behind it. It just gives me pause.
Great.
Is there a time frame that vehicles go from being sort of standard vacation, somebody's on vacation kind of nuisance to a problem being there too long? Like, is that a week? Is that 2 weeks? Is it 48 hours?
You know, I can't define what that number of days would be. I would definitely hope that if you guys thought a broader hour than the 72 hours, I would hope you would address that. And say, you know, if you wanted a full week or something like that. But I can't define what exactly that trigger point is. So.
I think there still is the issue that some people don't have off-street parking. Right, so I mean, these rules, I mean, we have. It's one thing. If you don't have off-street parking, it's another thing. So it seems kind of a little disproportionate. And moving them there that way. And I'm wondering if there's some type of comment. That can be issued.
What does this language, the very last page F, it says administrative permit from the city, like, is that address this issue?
It could, so it dovetails with the proposal ahead of that, subsection 1, where it says the city manager may, at the manager's discretion, issue an administrative permit for any motor vehicle, recreational vehicle, trailer, boat, or personal property to remain in the same location in a public right of way or on public property for a specified period of time longer than 72 hours. Any such permit shall be prominently displayed on the vehicle or trailer. And I think Susan has some suggested changes to that. And her situation and the other comments you got, they weren't really on my radar screen. What was on my radar screen in this kind of permit thing was the out of town in-laws come in with their Winnebago and they're visiting for a week and they just want to park in front of their adult children's house for a week while they visit. And so they could come and get an administrative permit. So it worked for that, but it could also work for Susan's situation. And the situation that you've described, Tim.
Couldn't Mr. Lavity's undesired guest get a permit?
Well, maybe we should put restrictions on it, but you actually didn't have to be.
What I realize is there's a sort of mistaken concept is that the curb in front of my house is sort of mine, but it's not. And that's really the core of this. Like, he's parked in front of my house, like, yeah, on the public street, like.
But for 6 months, but it's not any less yours than it is something.
It's not any less.
I go,
Grant and then Megan.
going through the permitting process sounds more and more convoluted, difficult, and discretionary. in a number of ways. I don't know if it's necessarily judicious of us to go down that path too much.
Thank you. Meg?
I also am leery of us getting into how we're defining permanent resident of if you have lived here for 20 years and have become houseless. Are you a permanent resident still? If you just moved here for a job a month ago, are you like, that feels like we're getting into some very questionable territory, both legally and from a like resident services end. I also had a question for Dan and or the chief of, can we have, if we decided to do any rules about hours, could you have different hours of, okay, you can only sleep in your vehicle in one location for 72 hours and have to move, but you can store your sedan for up to a month and you can only have your boat for 72, like, can you do for different classes of vehicle? Different things, because it seems like just like the basic car, it's like you've left it for 3 years and we don't like it versus like.
That's what's difficult is, you know, just like Gladys was saying about the van up there, you know, the propane tank. You know, we have to prove, we can't just, oh, we're gonna assume, so we have to prove. I mean, is it a situation we should be contacting this individual that's living out of their car that sometimes don't like law enforcement? So it puts us in a situation where it's not a criminal matter, but we're gonna have to address it and talk to them. Hey, living here, you know, that's the difficult part, is that proof.
Maybe maybe the permit is not like an annual permit, but like a lifelong permit. Maybe it's like a month-to-month permit. You know, something like you'd buy for a parking lot somewhere.
The propane tank is gone, by the way. The vans are there, the propane's gone.
That's great. Thank you for that update.
You're welcome.
So.
And I guess just even a permit, right? Now I'm gonna have to go and buy a permit when I'm just gonna be on vacation in Hood River for 3 weeks. Right.
Well, but I mean, even administratively, there's multiple thousands of people that are gonna need permits that we're gonna be issuing regularly.
You'd have to be to sustain the program, or else Abigail, you're gonna have a lot of work on your
Sounds
plate,
like
right? And so I.
Could I offer a suggestion?
Please.
And just suggestion. So we started with an assumption of 72 hours because that's a really standard time limit for a number of jurisdictions. I mean, I think Dan looked
Portland.
at a number of, I came from Beaverton, that was our as well. But recognizing, even if I'm just parking in front of my house or my neighbor's house or something, is there a time limit at which point that feels like long-term storage as opposed to just simple parking? Like, is there after 14 days or after 6 months, at which point a vehicle should have moved? Maybe if 72 hours is too long, is there a time limit that would cover 95% of the circumstances that you're thinking about? At which point you say, you know what, that car should have moved, even if it is my neighbor, even if I understand the situation.
Thank you, Abigail, for making that point. That's kind of, I was waiting for the right time to jump in to say that. I mean, 2 points. Public right away, I totally get that. You can't just claim that spot forever for you. So I think that's kind of what we're also addressing. Like, you can't say I'm a resident and, I live in this neighborhood. That's my spot forever, for storage or whatever. I have a lot of neighbors who have a lot of cars and they don't move a lot of the times. So I think that has to be considered. Also, it should be noted, I think, as well, I sort of, in my fact finding, talking to residents around this, most people were shocked to find out that we didn't have a 72-hour ordinance, right? So I think to your point, I don't think the message we should be sending is that, oh, we're just going to legislate this and then not enforce it and be arbitrary about that. But I think that kind of is the way that it's done in other communities, because you can't do nothing, but you can't over-engineer it without a lot of administrative costs and burden for the city. But I don't think the chief is going to be sending out or asking us next year, I need 75 more parking enforcement people to do this, right? You know what I'm saying? So I understand legally speaking, putting it on the books and saying it one way may not be the reality if we're not going to have a squad of it.
Do you have a number, Doug, you like?
I think 72 is the normal one. I think that's.
Mr. Ravity would be happy with 3 months. I mean, like 1 week, like.
How long has it been?
Well, 72 hours people don't go on vacation. You know, you could have your car, you could have friends come over, park in front of your house. And you all go on vacation. Somewhere, take a cab to the airport. You know, but most people are not gone.
Yeah.
They're gone for like a week or 2 weeks. So, I mean, and I agree with Susan that, the discretionary part of it's fine until it's not. Right, and then when it's not, it's not. I mean, because legally, technically, you don't have to.
A couple different points to the discretion thing. I'm thinking of this was my first or second year at council, but neighborhood over by 30th Street where one neighbor really didn't like people parking over the fog line and repeatedly called it in, repeatedly called it in until we changed the rule for that road. But it is a thing of like, yes, complaint based means most of us, I could have been my old neighborhood parked where I was parking and not gotten in trouble because who's gonna care? But it does create problems and it does create neighborhood issues. So I do have concerns about that. I think longer than 72 hours, if we're gonna do one standard number for everything, like it needs to be more. There's one other point that I already forgot.
Discretion.
More than 72, and I also, there was the language in there right now is, okay, when it does move after the 72 hours, it needs to be at least 1,000 feet away, and I did go on GIS, and that's 4 blocks. So this isn't just, oh, I in my old house that didn't have off-street parking, went to work every day, maybe left it for 2 days over the weekend, and then parked somewhere else. It's, I would have to go all the way to the other end by Serpentine.
And is that too far?
I mean, I could do it, and I did it in snow because it wasn't plowed, but like, that's not, I don't think that's a realistic thing to say, oh, I live in my neighborhood and I'm just parking on one side of the street and I'm going to the other. Because my parking space got taken, or I'm living my normal life, like to be like, oh, I'm gonna go to yours on May and 4th, now I have to park at May and 8th to meet the standard. I mean, I don't know what the number is. Maybe it's just moved, and I'm aware that we set that rule, so you can't just roll forward 5 feet. But if you're talking about actual people using this in their day-to-day life, and again, especially in neighborhoods that don't have off-street parking, but even anywhere, like, is it realistic to say, oh, my in-laws are visiting, after 3 days, they need to go park 4 blocks away to then walk back and do whatever for the rest of the visit.
That's too much.
So I think there's a couple of things. I think the time limit's too short. I think the distance is too long. I have a lot of concerns about enforcement of it.
I also agree, having lived in a street, when I lived on Columbia, I didn't have off-street parking, it'd be a problem. So, and I'm not familiar with every neighbor, I think I have a good idea, but could we not have a certain provision for those neighborhoods that don't have that option of parking off-street? Is that too slippery a slope? I don't know.
Band guy that, here's the street.
Yeah, good point, But, or could that be the areas that we're permitting for, for those areas that don't have off-street parking?
I'm hearing 72 might be a little too short of a time, and then 1,000 feet might be a little bit too long of a distance. Like, how about I'm the auctioneer, I say, what do you say for a week and 400 feet? That find more favor with people?
Yeah, it sounds good. I don't think Neil's gonna be out there with a tape measure measuring out 400 feet exactly or anything like that.
Well, I mean, Mr. Lavity would be very happy if he moved 2 blocks. I mean, I saw him, he moved 50 feet. Mark.
So I think we're way overcomplicating this. I think that we know that we've had problems with situations. The staff doesn't have the tools to do it. We want to give them a tool. It's not that as soon as 3 days are done, the tow truck is pulling up all these cars. It's sort of, they would go and they'd put something on the car and say, we noticed that you've been here, and move your car. And if there's another day or whatever, if they haven't called, they're probably going to tow it. So in-laws coming, it's all sort of takes care of itself. And the code has the ability to set up a permit system if the first 72 hour thing. And the code has the ability to set up neighborhood parking fees. So I think what we're talking about doing is putting in place a reasonable thing, whether it's 72 hours or 96 hours. I don't care very much, but we've asked for them to investigate a new tool, and they've given us one that has 3 different outs. I think that we're great to put it in play and see how things go.
This tool, you're good, unaltered, Mark, you'd be good with this one, I want to understand.
I would be good with it unaltered but if it's 600 feet in 4 days, I don't think that's fundamentally different, so.
They're not asking for a motion, but if you think Mark's talking wisdom, please raise your hand.
Can I put a caveat on it?
So we got no, just to be clear, we got no hands on this end. Go ahead now.
I would agree with Mark with certain, so if there were 3 outs, as you said, right? I would want to give a grace period and education to those neighborhoods about how to have an out before we implemented anything, right? And that would be important to me. Maybe that's without saying, but yeah.
This is a larger question, but yes, there's some long-term cars that haven't moved, but in the realm of like camping of like, we're solving 3 issues. And I don't, or 10 or something, and we're gonna create a couple thousand people that need permits for their neighborhoods. Like, is that a proportionate response? There's a level, like, we're not gonna write a policy that's never gonna have anyone abuse it or be somewhere we don't want them to be. So are we creating way more work to solve and I'm aware for the individual, people who come to complain, it sucks, and I want to figure out an answer to that. And I don't know if this is it, because we're just using a giant hammer to solve.
So you think there's 3 cars that are left here in the winter and that we have?
No, so I think winter thing is different, and that's where I'm like, fine, a month long, whatever, great. But if the 72 is really, we wanted a tool for Neil to say, okay, you need to move along. That's a very big hammer for not that. I mean, like, yes, it is a thing, it is a problem, but it's not like we're rife with that in our neighborhoods.
Yeah, I believe that creating the permitting system, as mentioned, may just create a whole lot more problems than we would fix. Agree with Megan. If it's just a simple matter of how many hours, if somebody's gone for a week, which happens, great. If somebody's a snowboard and gone all winter, they should prepare for that and perhaps put their car somewhere that's not in a street that needs to be plowed, for example, in the winter. That's something any responsible person, I believe, should do. Outside of that, that's where I'm at.
I'd like to give staff something that 4 of us agreed to. I think I kind of checked it, as written, doesn't have 4 of us. Somebody want to put out not a concern, but an answer.
I would be fine with this. That's 7 days and pick a number of feet, matter to me on the feet, really.
You want to know the genesis of the if it's too small, you'll have this cat and mouse game.
Yeah.
The fans usually they work. I mean, you already have a provision, the 8.20.010 unlawful vehicle storage designated time limit violation deemed misdemeanor. So vehicle storage is something that you've adopted a policy, don't store the vehicle on, but it's just written in a way that it only applies to junk. So the distance, 1,000 feet, that's a big move. So a few, like a block away is still, and then it'll be back a week later. So they can go back and forth and back and forth. And so that may not solve the problem.
I would echo you, Dan, I get the complaint, I just get the complaints, and when that vehicle is in their driving path daily, if it's seen, it's still considered an issue, even though our code today says, and we gauge with the valve stem, we have the digitized on our thing, that if that valve stem is moved at all, that's today considered moved. So we've got to be careful of that distance. It's got to be far enough to where you get those, as Dan said, the whack-a-mole continuous.
So I'd like to wrap this up. Grant said 7 and didn't care about the, so how about 7 by 400? Can we get 4 hands? I got a hand up for 7 by 400. Grant? Doug?
I would change it to 1,000 again.
Okay, you said you didn't care about the distance, okay.
Originally, then I got more feedback from our staff.
Yeah.
I think to make it technically easy for enforcement. Just like Megan said, whatever a block length is, let's go by blocks, whether they're 2 blocks would be 3,000 feet's 4 blocks, right? So 2 blocks is roughly.
At least on Main Street where I measured, I
Okay.
might change.
That would help us. Yes.
So I like a week and 2 blocks myself. Anybody with me on a week and 2 blocks? I'm not proud, I just am checking. We got 2, any more?
Lukewarm on 2 weeks.
All right, so I tried, Mark tried, your turn.
Week and 4.
Any hands on a week and 4?
Option almost.
That's tough for me to get to there because, you know, the situations that Megan has described, it seems difficult. 4 blocks can be, you know, let me ask, is 4 blocks difficult?
As far as the
So-
homeowner, property owner.
As an enforcer?
No, I like a little more distance, it's too close.
So
So when we go out and look at it, we'll gauge where it's at, it'll be marked, and then we'll make sure it's gone, so. Are we gonna drive the block looking for that?
Right.
Our goal is to make sure that vehicle has been moved. We don't have the time and effort to make sure it hit the 4 block mark.
So it doesn't matter to you if it's 2 or 4 blocks, really?
Well, I don't, my concern is getting too close, then it never looks like it.
Right.
I think it would be remiss in not mentioning that we have enacted policies that are discouraging. And, you know, I think that in the future, we probably will continue to do so. So that's what we're pushing on.
Could I, if we're pursuing this, I guess from my end, I would, instead of giving policy, you know, like, here's the number and another number, like, I would love to get more evaluation of how many neighborhoods or how many units don't have off-street parking. What would, if we're gonna suddenly create an entire new permit program, what would that look like? What's the staff cost? What would it cost community members to presumably cover that staff cost? Like, I don't want to just set numbers to say, well, we've solved it, but like, can we continue this conversation versus just pulling a number a little bit out of our.
And then you're making a data-driven decision based on your findings.
So you're suggesting,
I mean, your cities and too, and that's too, and Portland.
Yes, I'm aware it's really common, but that doesn't mean it works for us and what we're trying to achieve.
So try it.
That's not.
I mean, how else are we gonna do that? I mean, I don't understand how on-street parking means that that means the car can park there for 3 months. On-street parking means that I'm driving to the store and I'm driving back and I'm parking on the other side. I'm using my car. Which doesn't come into play at all with this. Or you have a car and you walk to work and then you use it. So there, every week, is that 72 miles? I don't think so. Is it weird? Is it? Okay, I'm walking to work every week and I should move my car. That doesn't feel like it's a draconian thing. Or I wait until the police say, hey, you have to move your car. These don't seem like huge burdens to me to address winterbirds and capers and things that are painful. It also doesn't seem that terribly burdensome to actually take a little time and think about it more.
I mean, and I recognize that no motion is being asked of us tonight, but it's all around decision or just a conversation of what we all think. In the end, we all get to side, right? And give staff that direction. I think we all recognize that this is an issue that has been brought up multiple occasions by a variety of community members.
I hear 2 votes for ask staff to give us some more information about neighborhoods and more thought. Dan?
Another thing to consider, and this is maybe Gladys for your father's situation, I wanted to put in here kind of a permit situation. So if someone's going to Baja for 3 months, they can come into Abigail, or your father can come into Abigail, and can I get a permit for this? And to what extent would that work? I think what Susan suggests is kind of a permanent residents get the free pass, and I'm not sure anyone else is more discretionary.
Yeah.
I'm a little reluctant to set up that, permanent resident versus transient dynamic, since I don't think you need to do that. So there's that. What I wanted to put in was kind of some kind of hurdle that wasn't super simple, but it wasn't impossible. And, so it's unlikely that someone who's just passing through is and they wanted to, spend a month to park their RV in someone's neighborhood, they aren't likely to come in and get a permit. But if they do, Abigail can decide, well, what's the plan? I don't want this thing parked in this neighborhood, for a month or all winter. So I'm not going to give you that. Whereas, it would be different if it was your dad, since he lives there. So that was the intent of that. So think about, is there some kind of permit system? I really don't want to go to this neighborhood district parking. There's a whole chapter in the code about it. I've seen it work in Portland, and it's a big deal to set up that bureaucracy and print the permits and administer them, and the cost of it, and draw the district. So I'm really reluctant to go there. So this is sort of permit light. Think what would work.
I get to what Dan just said. If part of what we were talking about is we want to discourage snowbirds from parking here and being in the way of snow, why would Abigail want to permit that for 3 months? And 2, it feels really weird to just, and I don't think this is particularly Abigail, but to be like, oh, city staff, oh, we like you, or we think you're permanent enough, or you've sold the story to us well enough that we'll give you a permit, versus no, you seem skeezy, we don't like that. Doesn't seem like good city policy.
Grant, is that a hand?
Yeah, just echoing that, is there legal liability to extending city manager to the kind of discretion just to issue permit to it?
Well, what Susan's suggesting is a good idea, in the sense that provides standards. I'm not wild about the standards she provides, but you could provide standards, lack of on-site parking, what are the circumstances, come up with some criteria that she can apply, because Abigail could be gone tomorrow and Attila the Hun could come in as city manager. And
I like that.
Isn't the choice when deciding on to purchase a home and the subsequent land associated with said home, also the choice to choose to buy how many spaces you can park your private vehicle upon your land that you have just bought?
Yeah, they're kind of like, gosh, honey, this is a cute house, but there's not really enough parking for us.
Or 5 or
that's a decision that a person could make.
Yeah.
Doug.
Oh, and potentially the same thing, with the caveat of we don't have enough housing, everyone's desperate. There's some level of, you're gonna take what you fucking get. I have never been able to decide my rental based on what's the parking situation. It's, oh, what can I afford that would actually let me in the time frame that I need?
And you drive your car.
Except when I'm gone, and I don't. That's the point.
No, the point is people almost never drive. That's what I.
Well, but I don't think that's what we're solving with 72. That's my point.
You may have to be pretty good to call you in. It's like 50 weeks of the year, you do drive it. You're almost never. Would you get called in?
Yeah, and similar to that, yeah. I mean, when I bought my last house here and the house before that, neither of them had a garage. One didn't have off-street parking. Luckily, one does now. It's a burden, certainly. And even the people that have off-street parking, I mean, they're not parking their cars in their garages. The garage is the toy storage, right? I mean,
I'm gonna suggest that we, council, cannot come to agreement on this. And we cannot encourage you to move forward on this.
What is that? Me.
That means I'm gonna go on to the next agenda item.
But then we.
But that doesn't give them any direction. Yeah, they don't have any direction.
So can we ask for more information that would help us come to at least a further point in this conversation?
That's one hand on more information. Can we have four hands on more information, please?
Can we include more information?
So let's first, if we can get like any, can we get four hands on that? We have.
I don't want it to die, yeah.
Okay.
If there's more information, I think there's.
All right, we got four hands on more information. What information would we like?
Yes.
May I start with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
So to Dan's point, you know, putting some language in there around restrictions, conditions, et cetera, that's what I would like.
Okay.
For the parking permit, the standards for the issuing the parking permits.
Yeah,
Okay.
like as you said, with similar to what Susan suggested, though not
Mhm.
exactly what she suggested.
Yeah, so it's not unbridled discretion.
Right.
Okay,
Giving the city manager a tool.
What else do we want back from staff?
I would like information about how many neighborhoods we're talking about that, and I know it's intermixed because there's some new things, but how many generally don't have off-street parking and therefore would be looking at significant issues. I'd love to know beyond just what are the restrictions on the city manager, but what does setting up these neighborhood parking programs or a citywide parking program actually entail from staff, from cost, from the community?
So what else? Not enough for now?
And I'd maybe just close with the, if there's nothing else, I've seen 72 a lot, as Mark said, it's not an uncommon thing. Maybe give us some information on some like communities that have similar density as us and what they do.
Yeah, we can't always just base things off of Portland, which I understand it's an idea, or here's what another town is doing, but it's another city. And I also just, again, continue to worry that now we're gonna create this whole other new system that we're gonna have to define fees and we're gonna set rates and
Abigail, how does this assignment feel? Overwhelming?
I've taken a number of notes and we can debrief tomorrow as staff and think about next steps.
Great.
Can I just one more question. I would be interested to know, I get maybe distinguishing camping doesn't work, but could we set different rules for boat, trailer, RV, whatever, versus just basic vehicle? And I don't know what the definitions, like the legal definitions of those things are, but it would be nice to know if we can have flexibility depending on the thing.
I can imagine someone parks their boat for 6 months.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Because you can't put it in the water.
All right, can we move on? Awesome, thank you. City Recorder, Ami, you got anything? City Manager, Abigail. Thanks, Chief.
Good night. Thank you, Mayor. I have just a couple quick comments for you. First is still a couple weeks away, but we have working with the Soil and Water Conservation District. We have puncture line polls. The first one is Thursday, July 13th, and then Saturday, July 15th. More information on our website and also on the Soil and Conservation District website.
Can you tell us when we signed up for those? Because I don't remember.
I will ask Jackie to follow up.
Okay, thanks.
Great. And if you haven't gotten to experience puncture vine, it's rough. It's worth it's worth getting rid of. You get a shoe full or a bike tire full of go-tos.
Go ahead.
You're wishing you had signed up for Abigail's thing. Okay, go ahead.
And I hope I'm not stealing Councilor Polson's thunder, but he and I were at the Board of Commissioners meeting this last Tuesday, and I'm pleased to announce that he was appointed, to the county, thank you, County Board of Commissioners. He was appointed to the ODOT Act 1, Region 1. So thank you for that. And also appointed as a member of the new Bridge Authority.
Yes.
Along with Yes.
Congratulations.
Congratulations and condolences. Also, I want to thank Ami for being here tonight. Ami Santillan is going to be leaving us. She is going to law school later this fall. So we're currently recruiting for her position. So hope to have someone as amazing and wonderful as Ami, although she's pretty hard to replace. So thankful for her being here tonight and all of her service to the city. And on a positive piece, we have a new city engineer, John Wiebert, started last week or 2 weeks ago. He has previously served as a city engineer, a project engineer, a civil engineer in communities in Florida and New York. So he is new to the West Coast. Found a place to live. We're very happy about that. And we will have him by to a future city council meeting, so you can meet him soon.
Great.
Those are mine.
Anything
Thanks.
else, Abigail?
That's it.
Committee report, Grant. Okay, we'll come back. Gladys.
No, it's fine. Just had you were there, bi-state working group meeting today.
Our last bi-state working group.
Your last,
That-
well, I mean,
well, no, you're on the other thing.
yeah, I mean, the last working group meeting anyway. So yeah, that's done. You got a little,
We had cake
yeah,
and Kate McBride came. That
And-
was nice.
we had cake and ate it too. It's great. I couldn't resist, sorry. So yeah, the Bi-State Bridge Authority will get a lot of stuff done starting on the 1st of next month.
Yeah.
And that's all that's going on so far.
Gladys.
I can't remember the dates, so I'm going to just say that off right now. MCAC has been working really hard to ensure that the annex is updated and renovated. I know that their board went last week and took a tour. Residents will start moving in, I believe, end of July. So that's exciting to see that it's up and getting up and running, and that there have been a lot of community volunteers. They have they were in the paper, I mean, millions of dollars. Kenny has done a tremendous amount of work, and millions of dollars have come in to really support these efforts. I think it's over 10 million that have come in. So appreciate Kenny and MCAC and all that everyone on that organization does to support our houseless individuals. So lots of good work. That's all for me.
Doug and I went to the Visit Hood River meeting this week. It was pretty interesting. I think that we'll get a little bit more information about this data collection thing that they have, that I have daydreams about being useful even outside the visit part. And it was another thing where we get to get our heads together and think about how do we not provide giveaways, but reduce barriers to development that that could pay out over time, kind of thing. So I don't really have my head around it, and I haven't talked to Abigail about how that could get on, or Paul about how it could get on a future discussion, but I think it keeps coming up. So future us.
Gladys.
Can I have or ask a follow-up question? So I recall Katie, I think last year she came and she gave us an update. When is she going to give us an additional update? Because I'm still waiting to see how Visit Hood River is going to target or market to Spanish-speaking individuals that have a lot of money, that don't live in the gorge, or really other communities. I know that they have the beautiful logos of I Love HR, but what about Yo Amo, or, you know, a variety of other languages, so that we're also targeting other groups to come to the gorge.
Thank you for the question. I think we are looking at later this summer. But I'm having coffee with Katie on Thursday, so I'll check in with her on that. Thank you.
Tim. For me. Doug.
Well, I was at the same meeting as Mark. I think I would just add that Christine Bartmus is outgoing chair of the board, and Dave Merrill from Double Mountain is going to be the new chair. Yeah, then Mark covered the rest.
Two committees I'm serving on. I'm the chair of the Columbia Cascade Housing Corporation. So we're eagerly awaiting the notification of funding later this summer to see if we did or didn't get it. And then CDP at some point, the community partner would or wouldn't want an extension, so sort of waiting for some shoes to drop on that grant. And then also I'm the chair of the United Way, which is not a city thing, but kind of is. And we're going to be having our annual gathering of the recipient agencies, and we're giving away $129,000 this quarter, which is a lot of money. So yay for them. All right, Grant.
One other thing that was late last week, regarding the bridge, Bridge Authority, was successful in receiving a lift grant of $3.6 million for the effectuation of the pedestrian / bike aspects of crossing the river. So it's, pretty good deal and big deal to get rewarded that grant.
And I think that the Oregon legislature did finish
They-
on like Saturday or something.
Yeah.
And I think we got 20 million, didn't we?
Yes. Yeah.
So now we've got state of Washington less from Oregon, but at least that's the significant, far and away the most we've yet gotten from Oregon. So that's good news.
It's one of those big thermometers. and
Yeah,
the
right.
Red line goes up. Where are we?
I think we're at about 145.
I mean, is that down in the ball still?
The top is 520,
520-ish.
but we're gonna bond the last 150. So,
Numbers TBD.
all right, mayor comments. The staff was very gracious. One of my kids' middle school teachers asked, could we have all the kids come by on the last day of school and get a stamp and say how many flags are behind? And like any number of middle schoolers marched through the door, and thank you, staff, for, I wasn't here, I was working. At the next meeting, I will be floating the Tachincini. So Mark will be chairing the next meeting on July 10th. And then finally, I just want to talk a little bit, it's late, but I appreciate the advocacy. Do we want to spend the money to have an interpreter here every week? That's not an answer for tonight, but that's a question for tonight. It's a legitimate question. I object a little bit that he says what you should do is this, like, yeah, you run for mayor, but I appreciate the advocacy. So let's keep thinking about that.
Yes, and my apologies. We thought we had coordinated and that we did not anticipate they would be here tonight. We had made plans for the next meeting, July 10th, to have an interpreter, but I will check in with Jackie and we'll make some plans for the future.
And again, if we get 4 hands for it, Abigail will start doing it. But does it come out of the sidewalk fund or what, Gladys?
Well, a comment, right, that we want to create an inclusive environment. So if you're asking just me, it's absolutely because that is our job, that we are creating a place where folks feel like they are going to come in and that we're not going to tokenize an individual of like, oh, well, you speak Spanish. Why don't you just read it and tell us everything that they're doing? That's not my job. That's not Ami's job. That it should be somebody's job, and whose job is that? I don't know.
So you would vote for?
Absolutely, because that's what maybe the interpreter's on call. Right, so that they're not necessarily here if we don't have folks that aren't here to speak Spanish or whatever, any other language for that matter, sign for example as well. But that we should have some sort of plan, because there will come times where someone speaks Chinese or Japanese, right? And what do we have? What sort of interpreting line do we have available to us? It might not be necessarily a person, but some sort of language line.
And again, this is now on my list for, annual goal setting, like, okay, let's talk about whether we want to do that. So that's the end of mayor comments, council comments. Doug.
Just want to thank the members of the community that came in from the mobile park and earlier. It's a horrible situation. Definitely feel a lot for them. I want them to know that they're heard. And yeah, to the last point, I hope there's more we can do to make them feel included. I wish more people would come in general from every community to speak regarding their issues that they're facing that we can potentially help with. And I thank them for their courage, and other people should take note.
Amen. Tim, Megan.
I'm gonna second Gladys. I do think we have a responsibility to figure out something, and I was actually just talking to a doctor friend of there is a phone service where you can have that versus, yes, someone has to come here and sit for 3 hours, even if no one's in the audience. But something I would like to talk about. And then I know we've gotten the email update, but are we communicating with the folks from the mobile home park and the they know what we are and aren't doing or what we can and can't do.
I think if I can speak very briefly on this, I think we can bring you more of an update later is we are, Jackie, our communications coordinator has been talking directly to Comunidades, who's been the folks coming here. I believe that the Housing Corporation is actually the folks trying to make contact with the owners and with residents, trying to get exactly what notice they received, because it seems a little bit fuzzy as to what even where the situation is and when notice was received. So while we were here, I emailed Joel to ask for an update on that piece. So we've not, I don't know if we've had any direct contact directly with the mobile home park, but we're trying to get that.
Okay, yeah, I just want to make sure there is that feedback loop of, I appreciate them coming. I want to make sure
Right.
they
Yes.
know and hear whether it's from us or from Joel, but.
Yes, so that piece, yes. Like, and I texted Jackie while we were here. She's gonna follow up with him again tomorrow and let them, trying to coordinate with that piece, but recognizing the folks who are coming. Some of them are residents, but we want to make sure that we're reaching all the residents and also the mobile home park owner. There are a number of parties, so. Thank you.
I just want to echo what Doug said, I guess, which is I'm glad people are in chairs. Coming multiple times, you get more comfortable with the goofballs that are up here, and then it's a little less intimidating, and we get a better product. So here's to more of that.
Yeah, we passed a resolution a while ago, right, around racial equity and how we, as a city, we're going to continue to do better. I think talking about options for interpreter services is within that resolution that we all made a motion to approve. So definitely would encourage us to consider and think of other ways that we can be inclusive to ensure that that's how folks are going to continue to come, right? If they know, they're trying, they're doing this and this to get us out there. I feel confident that we eventually will. Megan, thanks for bringing up and everyone else, right? The community members that are showing up. I too hope that they have some sort of communication that's going back directly to them so that they know, what we are doing, what we as a city can and can't do, and other partners that are involved, because it was very clear that they believe that we are the ones that are going to do something about it. And I worry about that because I know that we're very limited as to what we could do. And now if that discovers that we need to introduce some sort of key policy that needs to happen for restrictions and whatnot, okay, great. Then that's something we absolutely can do. But just to give them clarity on, here are these unintentional policies that exist that just make it really challenging for us to do something. So I would be happy to volunteer my time to be a liaison and communicate clearly with what is taking place, what we can do, what we can't do, and just to give them a timeline. Like, here's when you can expect to hear some sort of action item moving forward.
I don't want folks to be misled and overpromised.
And
I was really hearing like, oh, come here and the city's going to pay your rent. Like, yeah, that's not going to happen.
Right. But from just today's conversation, I got the sentiment that folks are thinking that we have the authority to do something when we're not the property owner, right? We don't have those kinds of right. I know the state can step in and, they can do something, but I don't know that they have that level of clarity. The third item is Ami. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so much for your time here at the city. Thank you for easing the way of any Spanish-speaking community member that comes in. You are going to be a badass lawyer, and I cannot wait to celebrate you and your success. Hopefully you come back and you work here for us as well. So thank you for all of your efforts and for just being that welcoming and inclusive face. Folks feel seen and heard and appreciated by you. So just thank you so much for being here, and so excited for you. Si se puede.
Anything else, Claire?
Nothing else. Thank you.
Echoing same thoughts and sentiments. I'm not sure, given landlord tenant law, I don't know if people understand how much legal framework we have to interject. I would recommend to any renter tenant, landlord, whoever, to better understand landlord tenant law and the options, the rights they have, things that are available to them, along with remedies for such. If particular things are promises made, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the tenants have rights. They can choose to exercise them as they wish. I don't know the veracity of anything that was said. They can evaluate that and take action appropriately. I hope whoever does. Landlord tenant law is online. They can look it up. There's copies of it around. I believe it's in Spanish at the library or county. So there are local resources in English and Spanish that it can be readily available. And that would be my encouragement for any tenant, is to understand landlord tenant law.
Anything else, Grant?
No, that's it.
Anything else for the good of the order?
Off that great comment. Not everybody can read. And so I recognize that that too is a barrier, right? As we're thinking about what are we going to potentially do 72 hours, I was thinking of that, like, okay, if we're going to introduce something new, are folks going to understand it? Do they know what it means? And there are other barriers that are putting in place that prevent people from feeling empowered and educated on their rights. They talked about abuse. They talked about, rent increases. And to me, what they said, that there is improper notice. So when you are afraid that someone's going to call immigration on you, that too creates this fear that you're not going to put yourself and that family at risk by then speaking up or looking into these policies because fear of retaliation. So there are some very real barriers that are put in place that not everybody in this room truly understands. And, I think that we can agree that we all empathize with their situation and that there's only so much that we can do as well.
That it? Thanks, everybody.